I'm sorry. Okay, so, welcome to the Marine Advisory Board for Thursday, June 5th. Um, take a second to figure out where papers are, boss. I want to take a second to acknowledge a few folks in the room. Ben Sorensen, who is our commissioner from, what district is that?
District 4, District 4, thank you. It's good
And,
to be.
Chip Martin was supposed to join us as well, but Chip got tied up and will not be in until 10 o'clock this evening from Tallahassee. Sends his best wishes, etc. So just a little quick background before we jump into the meeting. A lot of what we're going to talk about today has the roots in Ben and Chip's passion for the waterfront, passion for the quality of the water, the importance of making, again, boating safe for everybody. So I really want to acknowledge Ben. This is why we've asked him to come back and kind of give an update. Similarly with Chip. So thank you for that. And we'll get to you shortly. I'm going to be sent behind here. A couple quick housekeeping issues. Agenda item, our dock waiver, which is agenda item 8, has been deferred. We do not have a date yet when it will come back, but that has been deferred. If anybody's here, I hope you're ready for convenience. Another thing with respect to housekeeping, our July 3rd meeting is July 3rd. I know a lot of folks tend to be away at that time, etc. So I wonder if, just as a show at the end, perhaps, is a July 3rd meeting difficult for anybody? You kind of just let us know who has a problem with July 3rd. I may. Also, allow me to do roll call. Oh, I didn't get to it. No. Oh, that goes to roll call first. Okay. So does this stuff on? So that's okay. Chair Wood, he's here. Vice Chair Washington here. Very fine. Bob Swindell. John Lynch. Jeffrey Toten. Yes. Tyler Bruno. Here. Robert Frank. Jason Domo. Here. Brent Robotsky. Here. Norm Beckman. Here. LaRonda Ware. Here. We have 4. Thank you. What else am I missing? So, Dr. Robotsky, correct. So Brett has officially joined the board. He's been here for the previous meetings. We talked about passion for the waterfront, etc. Again, this is why you're here. These are unpaid positions, and we do this out of the passion for where we live and wanting to give something back. So, Brett, thank you for joining us. If you'd like to say a few words.
One of the few who was actually born in the state, born in Miami Beach. Native, which is kind of rare. Grew up here, went to college in Tampa, medical school in Philadelphia, residency, Utah practice here at the Cleveland Clinic for many years, and then moved to my own practice in Boca. Got injured actually on Coast Guard boat as a volunteer. Solar Resort crashed into the rocks at the Hillsborough Inlet during National Safe Boating 2015. The Hillsborough incident that everyone studies, but they don't tell the whole story. Unfortunately lost my career after that. Right after that, my wife comes down with pancreatic cancer. She was a dermatologist in town, and she passed away. I've been in Boca a long time. I've been on the Marine Advisory Board there for quite a while, and moved to Fort Lauderdale because it's a better boating place. I still have salt in my veins and addicted to boats and big homes with 1/4 money. That definition. So I came across what you guys do and was very interested and like to try to see things get a little better, have some insight. Have had a 100-ton captain's license for decades. Now it's 50 tons because I don't have a big enough boat. But master captain's license. I help teach the medical person in command at NPC every once in a while. I fill in for Bert. He's got to go do something. So it's my passion, my love, and I look forward to joining Bonnie Group. You guys do run exceptionally well compared to other ones. testament to your staff and chairman.
But you know what, we have a good group of people and I've shared with Ben and other city commissioners. One thing you do not need in this board is political focus. And so if you don't have passion and you're just here because you were appointed, no disrespect, we don't want people, we want people to be here. So that's been our the responsibility of our city commissioners and the board. Has done a phenomenal job. Let me cover a few other this housekeeping items real quick, guys. I'm gonna try to go down this. Back some time ago, Barry Flanagan mentioned, and I picked it up in my notes. We're still looking for commercial loading and unloading spots in the city. One of the spots that was mentioned was underneath Oakland Park 3. I don't know if that's viable. I looked at the spot. What I asked you to do, we don't have to discuss this any further, but I would ask that one of you or any of you find us look at the site, unless you have comments right now, and see if you feel it's fine feasible. If anybody wants to talk to it, I'd be happy to. Please.
Is he talking about the southeast side, that abandoned property, that property that just disappeared? That used to be a marina there. Do they have a pit?
I'm not really sure. I haven't spent enough time there, and that's why I'm wondering if somebody else could kind of advise on this.
I drove by it not too long ago. It's level and it looks like it's ready to go for something, but that's all I know.
So if you'd be kind enough,
What are you talking about loading?
commercial loading unloading, probably the city of, and our friends from MIASF are here, and they certainly know better than anybody else. The cost of doing a waterfront construction project goes up because of that. There's no ability for somebody to load, unload, bulk, and they have to go a far distance, and it takes a great deal of time. So we've been discussing it, it's been discussed for a long time. It was brought around, so we're just wondering,
Just because like all the circle, they just reinforced the entire seawall in order to be able to load and unload all the platforms and everything for boat show.
So if you'd be kind enough, real quickly before we get on to a few other housekeeping items, I want to take a second. Last night we had a meeting, if any of you were aware of, that Commissioner Thorns was at in Harbor Beach, at St. Sebastian Church, and it was discussing the ALA, which is Anchorage Limitation area. Now, I will tell you that it was an amazing discussion. This team, Andrew, Lewis, etc., could not have prepared better. Everybody in this room was there, and with respect to Travis and so on, the city managers were there, and basically went through the meeting and took 100 days to read. And are really focused now on House Bill 481. And it's important for folks to understand that we didn't scuttle what we did with ALA, but House Bill 481 was literally passed a few weeks ago. So it has changed things. Marco Aguilera, our new chief waterway officer, will go into great detail with that. Marco is where are you? Here. So Marco, I think he's hiding. So Marco is going to come up later. I'm going to tell you, we're all blown away. This is the guy who is juggling so many different balls and is focused on his presentation last year. And I'm going to tell you a secret that back some time ago, our dear friend Barry Flanagan, when we talked about a pump out book. And I'm going to stress again that the city of Fort Lauderdale, voting capital of the world, does not have a pump out book. So as we've been discussing Anchorage limitation or HB 481, to my way of thinking, it means nothing if we do not come up with this charge. So we've been working on that, and I am proud to say that we are close. Marco will make the formal announcement ready, but we are this far away from 1,000-gallon pump out. And that's because of his efforts over there. So we have the first annual, out of respect to Marco, a very serious award, and we call it the King of Poo. Marco gets the King of Poo.
First thing.
Having a pump out road is an instrumental thing to this community. You know, the concern for how do we staff it, etc. What does it do when it's not? It's not about big Sylvia. Go to the sandbar, just sit there, etc. the idea, again, the folks from the Anchorage Limitation Area discussion yesterday were concerned about, one of the folks mentioned for clean water. And we both here, I'm sorry, we speak here, and we advocate. Our dear friend Nancy Gasson, who's probably looking at us right now, has told me that fecal count in Lake Sylvia is actually acceptable. It may not be that way in the future, but the city is actually doing an adequate job right now. But a pump output is critical, and we will use it. So, Commissioner Sorensen, thank you for that. So, in addition to welcoming Brett, I'm excited to announce that Ted Morley has officially been appointed. So, Ted Morley is rejoining the board. Ted was previously chairman of the board. He timed out for 2 years. He's coming back on. He runs Marine Professional Training School. You talk about heart and soul for a letter of it's there. Again, that ain't a political point. It's somebody who really cares and understands it. So, me just a couple quick things again. In addition, I want to thank again last night, Bob Swindell, Jason Dunbar, Robert Washington supporting us. Marco's going to talk about this, but anytime we have a meeting, guys, you're all welcome to join us, and that support means a great deal. So we're able to point out to the audience that we have bench strength here, made it real impact on folks. Very quickly, Noel Norvell, our friend who's been on this board for quite some time, chose not to re-up. She is busy on other boards, and we respect that and thank her for her contributions. With that, I move to approve minutes of last month. I actually did read them. We have covered a lot of ground with Raquel and her team, but I see so then the whole team was here last month. I think the only one that wasn't here was Anthony Fajardo. That conversation was so special. I think not only hopefully did they take away something, but we did as well. And I would tell you, in addition to Ben, Chris, everybody, and certainly City Manager Williams, we got a whole different program for that as well. So stay tuned because a lot of good things are going to happen. So with that, can I now go to time?
Motion to approve.
A motion to approve the minutes. First of all, does anybody have any issues with the minutes? No questions, etc. We have a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay. Quick show of hands. All in favor? Thank you very much. That is approved. Thank you. Waterway crime body safety reports. Travis, you are up. It's safe to say before we go into this, we have PD, we have fire, and we have police. All of you guys are involved in some of the same things. So no doubt there's going to be redundancy, but I guess in a tough month, we got to afford that.
Okay. So I guess the first thing we talk about real quick is the air show. That was the beginning of May. Overall, it was pretty successful. Not too many. It was very rough. Couple days out there, 4 days for me with the practice. So there wasn't a ton of boats out there, but we did have a few. If you could play the first video. Yeah, the longer one. Yeah, that one. We got a call for a boat sinking with quite a few people on board the vessel during the air show. This is one of my officers responding to this. And this is the boat. The stern of this boat is, you can't tell right now, but it's really low in the water. It's a big, large man.
What's going on with this?
Probably about 4 foot plus seas that day.
Yeah, get on my boat, let's go.
There was a little bit of a language barrier between the family and the officer.
Let's go.
You're wondering why he's not tying off to it. It's because the seas are so bad, the boats crack together if you tie off to it. So he's having to constantly readjust the boat, trying to stay close enough to affect the rescue.
Kids. Let's go, get on my boat. Get on my boat.
I said there was a little bit of a language barrier. The officer and the family.
Grab onto this, grab onto this, grab onto this. Let's go, sit up front. Next.
This is not ideal. but it's the best you can do in these conditions. It's just the body care.
Let me get closer.
Get small officer.
Hold on, not yet, not yet.
The time was just right. So something slipped and crushed between the two. I gotta jump in at the last second.
Get on the boat. Let me know the unit down here.
So they were able to get everybody between, is this off to another officer? They were able to get everybody off that boat safely. They were able to get one of the towboats responded. They were able to get the towboat to get the vessel back to land. Everybody was safe. I will note, just for the record, that boat, it has 5,000 hours of the engines. So, you know, we're still operating it every single day in the patrol capacity. That's probably about, if you don't know, probably most familiar to, that's 300 plus thousand miles on a car would probably be in that realm. If you could show the next video, I'm sure some of you have probably seen this video. It was sent to me, just so I can kind of just get it out there. If you can see, this is a boat called Cycle Holiday, which is anchored north of Las Olas. There's a husband and wife who live on this boat, and they have a dog, and she's right now is cleaning up after the dog. So I was Mr. Edward Cave sent me this email. I know the boat, I know the lady's name, so we went out there directly that day, and she was charged with dumping that dog kisses in the water. So they don't. They have a removable toilet that they take to supposedly her work to dump, which they're not running. You can't do that. You can't do that. So we are following up with them to produce receipts or evidence that they take their waste to a proper facility that can accept human waste. That's good. Thank you.
When I tell you Travis, this was brought up by residents of public use last night. Significant voter attention. I respect that. And Travis stepped in, spoke to him, and made it clear not only working on it, but trying to be very proactive. Obviously, I some degree, but it's not falling through the cracks.
And just a couple more things. My office investigated a at-risk vessel, at-risk mean derelict vessel investigation for the boat that had dragged anchor. There was a gentleman on board the boat. He was cited for the boat being at risk of being derelict. Upon running him through the system, he had a warrant for his arrest. So he was arrested off the boat that day. He since got released, but he hasn't been back to the boat. One of my officers also recovered a stolen boat. The name of the boat was Not Enough. It was dumped into the New River, and the officers recovered that boat and was able to get in touch with the owner of the boat, and he was able to come and retrieve his boat. And then everything else I think Chiefs can talk about with the fire, and I can add to it if needed.
So, quick, since Commissioner Sorensen's here, one of the things we've been talking about then for months, working with both Travis and the fire rescue that's open capital needs. It's great to talk about the company, but $5,000, many things are going through ways. Open parking lot, so most knowledgeable guy I know with motors is consultant with this contract. We are closely exceeding them, and we do not have a ongoing, I don't know the exact term, but we do not have an ongoing replacement schedule. We are moving in and moving out. So we're basically waiting until motors pretty much die, and then they just bolt back to transfer to drop the water. So we can apply this by the but I really don't serious. We have boats that some extent out of respect to PP as well as fire rescue So we're working on those bills. Thank you.
That's 5,000 hours in how many years?
That boat is, that boat's 2019, so 6 years.
If you haven't spoken. Chief Eric Knowles, same thing, Chief. 4 fires in 1 month, way too many. I'm gonna throw it to you for in a second, but, what do we do? You know, and give us your update, and again, the fire and rescue does an amazing job. If you look, guys, you have a map and an update, you know, give choose forward, but what do we, how do we do?
You know something, there's a lot of people in a small area, everybody has a boat now. It seems to me, I mean, I know this stuff's still under investigation, but it's usually caused by vapors or they don't know how to fix the boat correctly, or they fuel the boat and put the nozzle in the rod holder, or they just do,
Or they don't turn it over?
they don't turn a blower on. There's, it's one of those things, I don't have the answer. I mean, unless you just pass a law where everybody has to go through extreme boater safety and like a driver's license, I guess. I don't know.
So I don't know the answer right now, because we talk about education and courses. So we do need better education, because somebody take a boat, rent it, and I'm not told to turn a blower on. I don't have the answer. And one of the things we talked to Travis about, and I'm gonna ask our friends from AES and ISF about this in a second. But if you have a highway and you're a cop, and you have a million cars a day going the highway, you expect a certain percentage of those cars are gonna have an accident. So is 4 an acceptable amount of fires in a month? I don't think so. You know, so I'm not sure if you're being absolutes, but I think it's one thing to have maximum, but extreme violence created here simply through, to some extent, ignorance is very frustrating. Phil, Jason, do you mind just take a second? I know this is really important to you. Do you have any thoughts on this process and what we do to better educate folks with this?
I think it's the time of the year and the weather again, so, you know, when summer comes along, get more drowning, get more accidents, get all those. So I think it's one of those pushes and education pushes in mind. If you go into spring and things like that, would probably be an awareness thing. Because again, it's all good, it's operating there. But you gotta remind people, unfortunately, to get on a boat, haven't used it in a while, to check things. This time of year, we start hoping something.
Is that rating for somebody who works at a gas station on the water, that not just somebody who just house drinks, they have to know something. We've had 2 that I can recall that came out of fueling up on 15th Street.
Yeah, I don't know.
So
I
I
don't
don't know
think
if that's
so.
something we should maybe discuss, that, you know, people there have to watch a couple hours video of what they're doing. Remember, the blowers, they could be the educational arm to help the people who may deal with it. Sure.
The other thing I'd like to tag on to what you were just saying is that people also need to understand what their own boats, the condition of their own vessels before they leave the dock. And there's a lot of people that'll just get on the boat and go, not knowing that a hose clamp is loose. You know, there's a hole in a fuel line, a cracked fuel tank. You know, all of these things. Knowing your own boat at the outset is so important, and you can start right there.
Keep going. Finish your report, please. But it's something that we all have to be aware of. It is not our charge, the fact that whether it's visiting our own residents or getting in do something like this, it seems like it's something that should be. It's education. You could put a sign up somewhere, but it doesn't. Whether folks are handing out flyers, whatever we have to do, we have to be much more proactive. I would say, with respect to them, the rest of the city commissioners, if we ask for a little help with that, I'm pretty sure they're going to give us some skills. Let's figure out what we're going to do. Go ahead.
Well, to add what you were saying, I mean, if you think about it, they have a YouTube channel where people go and video people putting their boat in at the 79th Street ramp in Miami. So I think if you look at it from that perspective and you say, listen, if you can't even put your boat in the water, how do you expect somebody to operate the boat on the water? And so that's kind of puts you in a perspective of what you're dealing with out there. And then
If you've never seen it, it is Doug Chipcho And it's truly amazing, and it's enlightening, as the chief said. Folks can literally, when you go to buy a boat, little boat show, you may not even know what you pay. It's $225 a month, and you are a boater. And so, yeah, we all have to do it. How was your month, then, please?
So we had an active month. There's two specific calls I was going to discuss. One very tragic incident on Memorial Day weekend. Sea Ship had a boat fire with multiple people in the water. Fireboat 49 and 249 responded. When they went arrival, 249 went arrival. The Coast Guard had 4 people on board en route to the ramp where everyone was being transported. No other people were in the water, and all persons were on recreational PD Coast Guard boats and being transported to like I said, the 15th Street ramp. Vessels in the area advised that the vessel blew up, drifted to the north, and was up against the seawall. It was approximately 40-foot sea rig. Fireboat 249 and 49 proceeded to the boat, had smoke and heat in the engine room with fuel in the bilges and surrounded water. Fireboats flooded the engine room with foam, did a primary search. No one was on board and called PD for an investigator. 11 people were transported. I just found out, I think one of them, there was a fatality involved. I think one of them passed away. I think he was 30 years old, 4 kids. So pretty tragic event. And I don't know if anybody's seen the video, when you start seeing videos like that, you understand it. I mean, the explosion happened, vapors caught on. It was one of those 1-second deal, but like just like that, that's how bad it can get for everybody. So it's tragic. The other one was on 5/28, which was 2 days later. B Ship had a 35 to 40-foot fishing boat that caught fire. The owner was doing some type of repair to the fuel sender when the boat caught on fire. The boat washed ashore and had multiple units along with Fireboat 6 assisting. The land-based units didn't do much because it was pretty far to the water, to the water's edge on, out in front. Our Fireboat 6, we put the fire out. Yeah, that was about it. The other thing I wanted to show you guys was
That's still.
you know what, after we put it out and we hand it over, it's kind of, I don't know. I passed out a map because I wanted everybody to see just the proximity of how far some of these calls can be. Primarily we have calls that are in the surrounding area, but I mean, you can go as high as Sea Ranch Lakes and all the way out to Chula Vista. And some of these calls, be mindful, like the one fireboat we had out in front, we got to go out behind the station, go out underneath the 17th Street bridge, then come back out, through the cut, and then come back out and put the fire out. So it can take some time for us to get there. So that's one of our challenges.
So you, and this has been mentioned before by Chief Bowman and others, one of the problems we have, and look, we got issues, put our cards on the table. One of the problems we have is one of your boats is offshore, as you discussed. God forbid one of our kids falls in the water, what may be, ain't no fireman around. So this is why we're talking about additional assets. Chief, let me just ask you a question. We're talking about how many boats do you have now and what is optimal for you guys?
We have 2 boats right now. One we're discussing trying to replace because it's 20 years old and it wasn't budgeted. So like O'Neill was talking about is 5,000 hours. We have a boat it's really old, and that's Fireboat 249. The other boat is from 2017, the 42-foot metal craft. But again, it has its purpose. So we have 2 boats currently right now.
So, and you say 5 is optimal?
Well, for the staffing of the boat, 5 would be optimal. The reason why we need 5 to have optimal staffing is because the service we provide. 4 is for shipboard firefighting, and that extra person 5 is for dive rescue. We fall under Dive Rescue 1 International that we recertify annually. And in order for us to run a safe dive operation, you need 5 people. You need an officer in charge, a driver, engineer, line tender. You need a primary, a backup, and a 90% diver. If you don't have those, then you can't run a dive operation. Our neighboring cities, City of Miami and Miami-Dade, have 4 that are that are on their boats full time. So that, you know, to answer your question, 5 is what we would, just because we provide that service, and we're the only dive team in the county that operates on, you know, the side of the city. So
And one of the things we discussed today, having another fire boat on the water, it's something that's, it's more eyes on the water. So the position that Chief Goldman took some time ago when we discussed this is, number one, they're all EMTs and they're all divers. So if tide was jammed up or there's an issue somewhere else, these guys in the water, you know, it's again, we have more eyes on hopefully increasing life safety, protecting life safety, etc. So that's one of our important issues, and I'm not going to ask them to speak to that. I'm going to give it the floor in a second, which is to, there's nobody in the city that I don't think was supported. The problem I see the city commissioners, out of respect to all of them, it's out of sight, out of mind. We all expected if there's an issue, he's going to show up. This fire, unquestionably, you show up. You think you don't show up, and we're trying to be much more proactive than reactive. We'll follow.
yes, sir. Thank you.
Very much. Thank you, Professor.
What does the Coast Guard help you about? Because their response time to the ocean should be faster.
So
boat fire.
So the Coast Guard, it's interesting you brought that up, because on this day, I can guarantee you the Coast Guard had a boat out because it's Memorial Day weekend. That's why probably they were there so quick. Historically speaking, they're not around because of their bureaucracy and the way their system works. They got to go through Sector Fort Lauderdale, who then has to get approval from Sector Miami. And by the time they get everything mustered up, the call's already over with, unless it's, you know, a specific call.
Their response time and by the bureaucracy.
That's just reality. That's how it works. They always get called. That's part of our algorithm when we call people and let people know. We advise Coast Guard, PD nautical units, and we all try to, you know. And by the way, not for nothing, what you guys videoed, I think everybody needs to understand as for PD side, what that guy did, because so you understand the full operation. I was on duty that day. I was a battalion chief, and they dispatched a host of people, right? A host of guys, a host of people. And what that guy did was extremely difficult, because not only did he have to navigate his boat, he had to get the people from their boat into his boat, but also what you don't understand is he had to also communicate to PD dispatch, our boats, and it's almost impossible task to do all that because you have a fleet coming. So that's kind of like what you're seeing right there. Can you imagine being there by yourself and you got 25 people that are trying to come and get updates when you're 2 or 3 miles offshore and you can't get them because he's by himself? So it's kind of, it's a challenge. So guy did really good.
It's had hands-free communication. That's something you can use instead of having to lose any of them. On radio.
I can't speak for them.
We used to have that, but it's unreliable. You know, it's Bluetooth, so when you need it quickly, it's not there. You know,
So I did not know this, by the way. I'm not sure if anybody, we actually have a fire rescue advisory committee. The fire rescue to provide the city commission, the city of Fort Lauderdale, community-driven feedback to forecast and support public safety, as well as future planning for fire rescue departments, etc. So that is headed up by Chairman Bill Brown. I reached out to Bill Brown, who apparently knows we're also working with you guys. So we're going to try and go down the current paths and make sure we're all working on that same page. So, Ben, you're going to hear from us hopefully. With that, I have the honor of turning this over to Ben, just for conversation. This really purpose of this, from a timing standpoint, is to coincide with the meeting last night and to acknowledge the efforts of Ben and share the moving forward anchor communication or work with Sylvia, which becomes a precedent-setting issue for other areas as well. So I have Ben come back, kind of just update us on his hot button issues and what we perhaps can do.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate it. I have a little something for you. It's not a poop emoji celebrating, so it's not quite as good. But it's just a little something, just thanking you for your service to the city. So this city of Fort Lauderdale, the official paperweight of the city of Fort Lauderdale with the emblem on it. So I want to give that to you. So when you get angry with me or the city, you can throw it at something.
So this is for the board,
Yes,
it'll show up to everything. Thank you very much.
Well,
So much, two-way street.
all right.
Okay. So last one, Chip, when the Chip was here last night, playing, he said, don't give me any more M and M's. So I'm like, well, it's the last thing we gotta worry about with this guy, but I decided to shift gears a little bit. So for this month, as a special to Ben and Chip, we have the inaugural. Show you on first. The inaugural Fort Lauderdale MAB Oreo. Thank you. I also want to take a second and acknowledge Ben's executive assistant Sabrina, who just took photos of us. You know, the chain is only as strong as the weakest link. There ain't no weak link. So thank you, Sabrina. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate it. I used to love it. My 8 and 11-year-old daughter love these. Thank you. Appreciate it. And yeah, wanted to just give you, last time I was here, you gave me a lot of homework, if you remember. And so I'm all in for homework. So I got the homework and went to work on it. So I want to give you an update of some of what we've been working on to do what you all want us to do as the experts. So, and I also want to acknowledge Representative Daly, who is our state representative for District 96, which is kind of Northwest Broward. He left, he was sitting next to patients. But when we talk about House Bill 481, which I'll touch on, and Marco will go into much more detail, but Representative Daly supported that bill, which is a real positive for our community. So I'll talk about that, but I got notes and I just want to share some of the homework that you all gave me and that give you a progress update. Fertilizer ban season. So obviously this matters for the quality of our waterway. Marco can tell you more about it, but he's been literally at Home Depots where fertilizer is sold and telling people what to do and not do. So that really helps in terms of algae bloom and phosphorus and so forth. So making good progress there. Oyster rope installation. So we are full speed ahead with getting more oysters hung in our waterways. Norm, is a champion of this. And so we've got to go through various permitting levels. We're working with Broward County approval, and CCA, so we can continue to hang more oysters. The quality of water that they clean is just amazing. So good progress there. Mangroves in the city. So this is something, again, I've really been working hard on and very excited. Hey, Jenny, how you doing? Yeah, go wherever you're good. Mangroves really been making good progress this past weekend. We did something in the city of Fort Lauderdale, never been done before, never to this extent. 50 mangroves planted at George English Park, led by Marco and CTA and a whole team of folks. And that's just the beginning. We're going to do a whole lot more mangrove planting. Amazing success in where we're going as a city. So that's another great upside where we're heading. Living seawalls, something we had talked about last time. And I've had an opportunity to meet with living seawall construction companies, talk with other cities that promote living seawalls. And I'm working with our city attorney's office in the city to create a new ordinance, first time ever in the city, that would incentivize the installation of living seawalls in our city. So what that means is looking at ways to where I want to head is cutting the permitting fee in half for those individuals, private, government, and so forth, who install living seawalls as opposed to traditional seawalls. Living seawalls, for those who might not know, promote marine life, sea life, plant life, adhering to the seawalls and having a much more robust ecological system to the seawall. So we're working on drafting that ordinance now. You're going to see that coming in front of us as a commission, hopefully in about a couple months. So that's great news. We're also, as we look at city putting in seawalls on city-owned property, I want them to be living seawalls. And I'm going to be driving hard on that with that expectation. Okay. Next topic is increased water quality signage. So it's something we're really trying to work on. As you know, we partner with Miami Water Keepers to test 11 spots throughout the city. We're working, I really want to see that doubled. It's up to 22 and increase source tracing, which in other words, not just identifies where we have high bacteria levels, but what's the cause of that? Where is it from? Is it canine, human, bird, so forth? So we're working on a new contract with Miami Water Keepers to do that and improving the signage when we have high counts to let the public know. The challenge with signage is putting it in places, one, where it's visible, and two, where it's property we can place signage. In other words, if it's private property, we have to ask for it. We're working on improving that. So that's moving forward. City-owned docks. Oftentimes we're having commercial vessels operate on city-owned docks, not acceptable. And so again, thanks to the officer and the team, we're working on increasing our enforcement around that to limit that commercial engagement on our city docks where it's not allowed. Pump out vessel, I already talked about. Marco's doing great work on getting basically a state grant for that pump out vessel, which would be amazing. I'll pause there before I go through the rest of my list. Comments, Norm, looks like maybe you have a question.
Yeah, I've got a question on commercial vessels on city-owned property.
Yep.
Why is this a problem? If we come up with a fee structure for commercial vessels, you issue a sticker, maybe it's color coded depending on, the duration of the permit.
Mhm.
Why are we just trying to not have commercial, and we're looking for commercial landings, but we're automatically eliminating city-owned dockage facilities first. So
Yeah, I mean, so I'll defer to you all on.
It depends on what also depends on what docks you're talking about, because a lot of the docks, especially downtown, the floating docks, those were bought through a grant for recreational use only. So if the city were to allow commercial operations out of there, they could potentially lose those docks. I am for. I think there needs to be a space for charters and commercials pickups. And they do have it at Smoker Park currently right now. They can pay a fee and pick up there now. I do think there probably needs to be something better for that, but there just isn't anywhere like currently right now besides Smoker Park where.
Well, I would just suggest at this stage right now, let's come up with a fee structure that makes sense for commercial operators. And then let's, at the same time, we need to, like you said, identify new locations. I've got a big question about the north side of the river in between the railroad bridge and Andrews. That's been roped off forever. I know it's in a terrible state of disrepair, but I think that's one location that we can definitely. I mean, this commercial operators have been working out of that location for decades.
I mean, I know Steve was in the meeting. I know they talked about possibly in the future with the Hall of Fame, there's be some floating docks there. That might be a place where they could pick up. And there's a lot of it too is like you say here, but there's no parking. A lot of the stuff is just not conducive for a lot of people, But something like the Hall of Fame Marina with the parking garage and the beach would be a good.
And that brings up another point. Our brand new marina up at Las Olas on the northeast side. There's no commercial landings that are permitted there. I think that's a disservice to the community.
Okay. Yeah. Well, Marco,
I can definitely look for some options and bring them back.
So we spend the whole meeting on that.
Yeah,
I think
that's
we
for sure.
crossed it through our many times. One of the things I think the student and Marco and everybody else involved is, we've seen thought crews cheap. We're seeing action now. So we will follow up on that. Bring that around. Can I interrupt for 1 second?
Yeah,
and
sure.
tell you something? Could you put up number 8, please? So we talked about talk coming cheap in action. So this is in Ben's district. If we can get the slide number 8 for that video. This is somewhat self-explanatory. 2 minutes.
A
This
seawall
is
can
Ben's
protect
vision.
our property,
Yes, I'm sorry.
but what if it can
Watch.
also protect the health of people and marine life?
Like,
Like many kids, Cruz loves playing in Florida's waterways. Unfortunately, a swim in a canal led to dangerous infections caused by pollution and a dying ecosystem.
2 days after I was swimming in the water, my stomach started to hurt a lot. When I got to the emergency room, they put me in the hospital bed and they said I would have to stay overnight.
Cruz's illness was a wake-up call. With E. coli and Salmonella present, we must act.
This is the world's first 3D printed living seawall, a revolutionary and beautiful innovation by Miami tech startup Kind Designs. Founded by Anya Freeman and backed by investor Mark Cuban.
Living seawalls are structurally identical to concrete seawalls. So they protect the properties from flooding, from erosion, but they're also living. They have a biomimicry design. It enables them to function like a marine habitat. So they attract native species. It's amazing for corals and oysters to anchor to. Did you know that one oyster filters 50 gallons of water in a day? Every single day.
More than just a barrier, the living seawall is a home for marine life inspired by nature's perfect design. It's a beautiful and sustainable way to clean and heal the water. Faith teaches us to care for creation, to leave the world better than we found it. The living seawall gives us a chance to do just that.
God has called us as all people to take care of the land, and Church by the Sea takes seriously the desire to be good stewards of what we've been given.
It isn't just for my son, it's for every family and child that swim in these waters. It's for our future.
With your support, we can bring life back to our waters. Join us. Help build the living seawall at Church by the Sea. Sponsor a foot at livingseawall.org.
Tied by the church now, it's not upfront, dedicated website. It's the coolest thing I've seen, and it's happening in District 4 under the office of Commissioner Sorensen. Just so happens something is here from Kai Design, practically a granddaughter, but I'm not going to put Maddie on the spot. But if anybody wants to speak thereafter, it's safe to say that Kind Design is one of the first groups to do this, and they've worked hard with the city. And I think, Matt, your first store is Dr. Meyer. So is that
Yes.
Is that already up?
Our first wall, residential project. Will be installed in the next 2 weeks. They're starting mobilization. It's by Seaside Green Construction. It's the contractor that we chose. And yeah, now that'll be the first small project.
So the idea with the Church to See is they've actually built a platform, or in the process, I'm not sure how advanced it is, but they're building a platform so you can actually walk out of the water and see the living seawall. I like to make that pass, but that's something serious committed. So Ben, thank you for that as well. Thank you for the commitment to this. Just what it's worth, I'm not going to back anybody or anybody else supporting with respect to marine construction. But if you're contemplating this type of construction, it doesn't cost any more to do it right now. So that's our future.
And we're not just the test bed for this either. Didn't you guys do this in Miami Beach in some locations?
That's what I think.
I'm a big fan. Congratulations, and I want to see it everywhere. Great.
How long have they been going?
Our
What's your longest?
regulation,
Your expectation as longevity? Is the wall going to get much thicker and effectively grow the way Carl usually grow?
So yes, we'll see but it's not waterway.
So the oyster stuff on top of oyster stuff on top of oyster.
Yeah, so oyster clusters will go on it, but it's not gonna be outwards area. So Grenfell waterway improvement, we will see a great, like, not green growth, to corals, oysters, especially.
I think what we do, so Brett, you want to hear maybe some of your work as well. My granddaughter Maddie, Anya Friedman, who started the company, etc. They're backed by Mark Cuban, by the way, so there's some real steam there. But they've made tremendous strides, and we'll have them back, give us an update, etc. But the fact that the city is so pro living seawall, kudos to you.
Yeah, no, thanks. And thanks to Maddie. Maddie came to our Lauderdale Isles Water Management District with Earl and Jeff and presented. And so as I learned from her, I was like, this is awesome. We've got to do the same thing here. So thank you for helping bring it to Fort Lauderdale. Yeah, you're welcome. And we're not just, you know, oh, it's nice. No, the city, we're going to be investing in the Church by the Sea living seawall. So we're all in part because we're not going to get, I don't think I'm going to be able to get the permit, the updated ordinance passed incentivizing permit reduction for living seawall in time. So we're finding other ways to incentivize. And that's leading to private neighbors near Church by the Sea saying already, hey, I want this on my seawall. So it's already starting to spread. So thank you for that. It's awesome. Just a couple other items. As was mentioned, House Bill 481, Mark will go into more detail, but Andrew Cuba, Ben Rogers, Marco did a great job last night. And this ordinance, this state statute, which would allow for the city to enforce anchorage, limit anchorage to 30 consecutive days, a host of other factors. This is something that I started talking about with Representative LaMarca probably 8 years ago when I first came on the commission. Representative LaMarca has been fantastic, and it was signed by Governor DeSantis. This is going to be a game changer for us, especially those around Lake Sylvan and so forth. So more really great news coming. So what we have to do with the state ordinance is we have to create a city ordinance that falls under that power. So we're going to be, and again, Ben Rogers is doing a great job on leading this, you know, probably in 2 to 3 months, have an ordinance come forward in city commission, we can pass and then enforce and run with. So that's awesome news. Lastly, another success, just want to celebrate Phil and Patience. They really helped drive this, is 17th Street bridge opening. So this was something we've had long challenges with vehicular traffic. And so we were thinking about how can we, you know, not negatively impact the marine industry, but also find ways to move more vehicular traffic across 17th Street. So we all got in a room at Phil and Patience's office with the Coast Guard, city staff, other leaders, and said, hey, let's work on this. We've been talking about this for a long time. Let's work on this. Coast Guard, again, Phil and Patience, tell me if I'm missing anything, but the Coast Guard basically said, great, we want to partner. Here's the process. Here's the letter. Here's the forms. Here's how you have to apply for all this. Put that all together, get it to us, and then 1 to 2 years from now, we'll get back to you. Right, Phil? Okay. So we said, hey, I'm Navy, so I know how to work with our coasties. I said, hey, thank you, love you. And then we just stayed connected with them. Ben Rogers really helped drive it. And, you know, a couple months after that, they sent us an email, the Coast Guard did, and said, hey, we're approving a reduction in the openings of 17th Street Bridge during rush hour by 2 in the morning, by 2 in the afternoon, in effect, starting this past Monday. So great win, great partnership. And we're going to continue to partner to find win-wins for both traffic, marine and vehicular up top. So that was awesome as well. And then lastly, and Norm, you brought up the seawall on Riverwalk. It's something Jenny and I and the Riverwalk have been, city staff been working on. That seawall area right near the wharf is failing. So we've got to replace those seawalls, which we're working on. And the opportunity there in the short term, we got to fix the pavers. Basically, I want to get rid of these metal fences. I think they're horrible. So we're going to work on whether it's grass or some way to kind of have a safe way pedestrians can traverse the area without trip hazards and getting rid of those fences until we get the seawall replaced. So that's looking good. And then lastly, Ben Rogers just shared with me that we're exploring a $100,000 fine grant for replacing the motors of our, those heavily used motors that we were talking about on our, PD boats. So that's, did I say that right, Ben? So, fine, Grant?
Yeah, so we actually have 4 fine grants that we're doing, those presentations later on in June on the Cocoa Beach that we'll be at. One of them is replacing the outboard motors on the LPD boat #1. That's $100,000 grant. You can see that. We also have 2 projects associated with the aquatic center, the Ice Peninsula. One for the seawall replacement, one for the promenade of this. And then the 4th one we have is the new university boat project. And that's $4 million. That's doing all we can to try to find additional funding sources to try to close the gap.
Our doctors are meeting building right now.
I'll stop while I'm ahead.
Outstanding.
Yep, thank you. Thank
Hey,
you.
let's stay with some-
I'll stay for a few minutes and then, yeah.
Fancy who's coming up, you did mention the guy behind me, if you don't know Ken Rogers, he joined us last month. The same thing with, Commissioner Swords, so you asked him to show up, it's not where, et cetera, just tell me when, and he's there. I'm gonna ask Ben, but I wanted to just, in a second, I want to just take a second, because Chip did send me a message. And I just want to extend, I appreciate the opportunity representing our state capital, which is where I am to speak, completing our state budget process. I'll continue to work with our local residents and our lawmakers to make our recreational boating areas safer, more compatible to our surroundings. I'd like to acknowledge that none of this would be possible without the support and cooperation of the advisory board members, dedicated staff, and certain citizens like yourselves. So, thank you, everybody. And, you know, we're making it all happen, and we're making it all happen because of true leadership. We have terrific leadership. Ben, do you want to just kind of update us on anything special? I mean, I think if you're not something that's politically important, anything special on your agenda that should be aware of.
No, thank you for the opportunity to speak though. I think that Marco, when he speaks on some of the things that he's working on, Mr. said they put a vision together to have the chief waterway officer prioritize the deliveries and services that this board focuses on. So I think the introduction of Marco months ago, movement on some of those things, city manager is committed to support those things and really deliver on them. So and also Florence and the commission on giving us the resources, direction, and vision, and this board helping us. Thank you for all you do.
And to that point, you know, we don't, the fact that we get to see Commissioner Sorensen every once in a while, Ben Rogers every once in a while, these guys reach. You know, you want Ben's cell phone, you can cell phone. You want to text him, quick response. If you don't get him, I guarantee Sabrina will. Same with Ben Rogers. So if there's something in your mind, again, let's be proactive. And we have folks that are extremely so. So with that, thank you.
Thank you. If I could add one other thing, Steve, is we have, after we met last, Sabrina and I developed a waterway tracking Excel spreadsheet. So it's literally all the initiatives that we're working on in District 4 and in the city. And that tracker, that's just what I basically read to you some of. So if you have anything that should be added that I should be working on, please tell me. Just email, hey Ben, what about this? Can you add this? So a new fireboat is on there, and we've been working with a private donor to possibly make that happen. But just tell me what I should be doing. I don't know everything I should be doing. Guide me on it, and then we'll act. Thanks.
That's my one takeaway with the city commission. We have one board review and those boards and every other thing that he's doing. So if you have something that's important, send a message. To city staff, because there's only so much they can keep on their plate. I guarantee you they can bring it to their attention and get a response. Thank you. We're going to move on to Dr. Gaston and please. So we started with this. I started with this conversation with Dr. Gaston back some time ago. Nancy, are you on?
I am. Can you hear me?
See you right here.
You should be able to hear me and you should be able to see my screen.
See you. Dr. Gaston,
You should be able to hear me.
yes, we can now. Thank you very much. So, before we start, let me give a little background. Our dear friend and somebody who is, we talk about caring and, again, taking proactive steps to preserve and improve our infrastructure is Dr. Nancy Gassman. Dr. Nancy Gassman is PhD, Deputy Public Works Director, Chief Resilience Officer of the Sustainability Division for Fort Lauderdale. Similar to Commissioner Sorensen, thank you, Jen. Take care. Commissioner Sorensen, etc., she never says no. When we ask if she would participate, it's what do I need to work on? So, when we started with this conversation, I reached out to Dr. Gaston and I said, hey, I'd like to join a meeting, and the top of the conversation would be, is it too late? So the little lady that's freaking out there who says, you know, you may not see Dr. Gaston, is it too late? Is it too late to sea level rise? Is it too late for clean water, etc.? I'm pretty sure that may not be the case, and I'm not sure we're ready to panic yet. I've spent a fair amount of time digging into other municipalities, etc. But we are truly honored to have Dr. Gaston, who's going to explain again what responsibilities a homeowner has, what the city's going to look like in 5 to 25 years, and contemplating the impact of our waterway world. So with that, Dr. Gaston, thank you. Welcome. Dr. Gaston broke the femur some time ago, guys, and has been unable to attend the office, but she's there all the time. And again, thank you and welcome, Doctor.
Thank you very much, Chair Whitten, and members of the advisory board. Thank you for taking the time to talk about this really critical resilience topic. I try not to come at this from an approach of is it too late, but rather what can we do and what can we expect? So I've entitled this The Where and When of Sea Level Rise, very specifically focused on marine interests. So today I'll cover sea level rise, some topics related to seawalls and bridges, the king tides, areas that are particularly vulnerable to sea level rise, some of the work that the city is doing, and the idea of looking backwards as well as looking forward. So one of the longest tidal records available locally is a tidal gauge that NOAA has on Virginia Key. And when you look at that, what you see is that we've had about 8 inches of sea level rise over the past 100+ years. But when you look at just the last 15 years or so, there is a pronounced acceleration of sea level rise as observed at Virginia Key. And this because sea level rise is not expected to be linear. It's expected to accelerate over the course of this century. The Southeast Florida Regional Climate Change Compact in 2019 put out a projection of how much additional sea level rise would occur based on a baseline of the year 2000. And so you can see for the year 2040, the key area, that area in pale blue, is that we're going to expect between an additional 10 inches and 17 inches of sea level rise by the end of 15 years from now. And for 2070, that number is between 21 inches and 40 inches, with as much as over 5 feet if you look at the NOAA Extreme projection. But the Climate Change Compact recommends to focus in on that light blue area. Now, this is relative sea level rise, meaning there's a baseline that sets the 0. When you look at the actual topographic datum, which is called the North American Vertical Datum, those numbers gets translated into an actual elevation. And so the expectation by the year 2040 is that mean sea level is likely to be somewhere between 0.6 feet NAVD and 0 NAVD. This is different than mean sea level. It's different than mean high water, et cetera. And by the year 2070, which if you put in a seawall in 2020, 50 years is really the useful life of a seawall. You want to make sure that it's built at least to 2.5 feet. And Steve had asked me, are our seawalls going to be tall enough? The city is following the Broward County template, which requires us to build all new seawalls at a minimum elevation of 5 feet. So in theory, those new seawalls built at 5 feet should be useful against sea level rise for a significant period of time moving forward. Recognizing, of course, that the groundwater table is also rising and that creates other complications, but a 5-foot sea level is protective of future sea level rise to a degree. And the Broward County ordinance, as well as the City of Fort Lauderdale ordinance, states both a minimum and a maximum height for new seawalls. Minimum elevation is really to protect the property from the ocean. So as sea level rises, you want to make sure that that seawall is high enough to protect the property from the sea. When you're looking at the maximum elevation, what you're trying to do is protect the property from rain events. If you build your seawall above your finished floor elevation and you proceed to fill your property, if it rains, the rain's going to go into your house and not away from your house. That's why we also establish a maximum elevation for seawalls. So all seawalls built in the city of Fort Lauderdale have to be at least this height, but not higher than that height. One of the other critical issues for anybody who has waterfront property or is interested in navigating our waterways is bridges. The city has 53 fixed bridges. And while we have started to replace some of these bridges, we really don't have the right of way to accommodate elevating them by any significant amount. The last bridge we raised by 1 foot to increase the availability of space under the bridge, but we don't have enough right of way on either end of the bridge in order to elevate it by much more than that. And anybody who has gotten caught at high time trying to get home between where your house is, fixed bridges between your house and where you are, you know that you might be waiting for low tide to get under that bridge. And so sea level rise, that additional challenge for these bridges, where as sea level rises, navigability in some of our more inland waterways becomes more of a challenge. As sea level rises, it puts stressors, lateral stressors on the bridge. Bridges are not intended to take lateral stresses, and that means stress from the side. So as the tide comes in and out, it's pushing on the side of the bridge. And if it gets to the point where the tide is up to the bridge foundation, where the roadway is, that can create lateral stressors that are problematic for the bridges. And so when you start thinking about where are the challenges for the waterways relative to sea level rise, bridges is one of those things that people don't think about very often, but it's a critical aspect of life in the city of Fort Lauderdale, especially recognizing that 33 of those bridges are single access, which means if the bridge fails, there are houses on the other side that have no access to their homes at all if that bridge fails. And so they're really a critical piece of infrastructure for the city. I'm going to switch gears and talk a little bit about king tides. King tides is a phenomenon that we see in the fall, where the alignment of the sun and the moon create much higher tides than they do in the spring. And when you look over the course of the last 7 or 8 years, what you see in this graphic is that we've experienced as many as 108 high tides. Now that's not days, because we have 2 tides per day, but we've had as many as 180 high tides that exceeded the threshold for flooding in some of our lower lying areas, which means that on average, some of those places were flooded for 90 days because of this sea level rise. And the high tide is really the first indication of how sea level rise is impacting us locally. So far this year, we've only had 5, but we haven't entered into king tide season yet. When you look over the course of January 2019 through the end of December of 2024, this graph sort of shows you 2 critical things. First one is that, again, these more extreme tides are happening in the fall. That every year we've experienced tides that are higher than 2 feet at peak. To put that in some context, current average high tide for 2025 is 0.41 feet NAVD. And we could see tides that are over 2 feet. So more than 1.5 feet above the average high tide for the year. The highest high tide we've experienced over that time period occurred on November 9th of 2022. It was supported by a tropical event. I'm not going to say that that was storm surge, but it was certainly related to a number of meteorological things that were happening. And as I know that there's numerous boaters in the room, you each look at the tide charts in a different way. So I've converted that North American vertical datum over to mean sea level, mean lower water, and mean higher water to give you a sense of how high that tide was. Oh, and there's something called the wobble. When the Earth and the Moon and the Sun circle, currently the Moon's orbit is in the same plane as the other 2 celestial bodies. However, the expectation is in the year mid 2035, mid 2030, so 2035 to 2040, that the Moon's orbit is going to wobble out of that plane. And when it does, the northern hemisphere is likely to experience even higher tides than predicted for that time frame. So regardless of sea level rise, the gravity of the Moon is also going to drive up the potential for these very extreme high tides coming into the next decade. So where are we vulnerable? The city has invested grant funds from the state to perform a vulnerability assessment. And I'm only going to focus on 2 locations because otherwise it's overwhelming. So I'm going to take a little time to explain what you're looking at here. The star is Andrews and Broward. So essentially right near the old City Hall. And here's the confluence of the North Fork of the New River and the South Fork of the New River. And what you're looking at is the NOAA Intermediate High prediction for the year 2040, so 15 years from now, in addition to what the water level would look like if we had an extreme high tide. So this is not the permanent sea level rise. This is the sea level rise with an extreme high tide on top of it. And I chose the downtown area because it's one of our main economic centers. And then if you look at the colors, the legend is on the left side. And the very, very light blue is 0 to 6 inches of water, potentially on the land. And then the very dark blue is 3 feet. So what you can see is that even in a 15-year time frame, that there are many areas in our core economic centers that have the potential to experience high tide flooding at some point during the year. And seeing that we are talking to the Marine Advisory Board, I had to look at Marina Mile. So again, same graphic. This is the year 2040. This is the expected sea level rise scenario with the high tide overlay. And it's not surprising that the marinas are at sea level and that over the course of the next 15 years or so, they are likely to experience higher levels of flooding due to both king tides and these sea level rise events. Does anybody have any questions about that before I move on? Okay. So what is the city doing? The city has made huge efforts to try to address many aspects of the impacts of climate change. And that includes extreme heat, extreme rain, tides, concerns about how storm surge will impact the city and how that's changing as sea level is rising. So one of the things we think about first is how do we address access to people's properties and homes, whether that's commercial properties or whether that's private properties. And so that always starts with flooding on the roadway. If you can't access your home, you have a concern about how your home's being impacted. Then there's a series of steps that we would look at first. So tidal valves is one of the first things that we would do to prevent tidal flooding. We've installed nearly 200 of those, way more than any other municipality in coastal South Florida. The next thing we would look at is seawall elevation. Now, the city owns probably less than 7 miles of total seawall compared to our 165 miles of waterway. So 165 times 2, and you start to get an idea of how much of our seawall protection is on private property and not city-owned. Most of the city seawalls are either in parks or they run adjacent to roadways like on Cordova Road. So I'll talk a little bit more about seawalls in a moment. Then we're looking at stormwater improvements, which can support some aspects of tidal flooding, but they are mainly geared toward more extreme rainfall. Pumping systems is another option. And then at the very end is road elevation. And the city is looking at funding a road elevation master plan to try to prioritize which roads are critical for us to raise in order to ensure continued access to the various neighborhoods throughout the city. In 2017, the city released a seawall master plan. It did not include all the seawalls in the city. It focused mostly on seawalls that were adjacent to roadways. We missed a lot of the dead-end roadways, but in the end, it gave us a roadmap in order to be able to think about which roadways were critical for us to start to protect, and that were currently, the seawalls were at an elevation that was not helpful in protecting the roadway against sea level rise. And so to date, we've completed Cordova Road from 7th to 12th, the Isle of Palm entryway, 2 seawalls on Hendricks, the Merle Fogg seawall, the seawall at Southeast 10th Street in Rio Vista, and then a number of seawalls along the south side of Los Olas, which regularly flooded one lane of Los Olas going east. And so I'm hoping that what we'll see this year is a significant reduction of flooding along Los Olas Boulevard. And under design, we currently have Riverwalk to the railroad bridge, Sebastian and Seville on the Barrier Island, and we have design work going on at Solar Plaza Drive in Riviera Isles. We just finished a second phase of the Seawall Master Plan, and it identifies all the seawalls under city ownership, which includes those that are in parks, those that are at the ends of streets, and any other city-owned facility. And once again, it prioritizes those seawalls for replacement based on elevation and current condition. Another major effort that the city is taking on is something called Fortify Lauderdale. Its major target is extreme rainfall. Our current stormwater system is geared toward addressing 3 inches of rain in a 24-hour period. But as everyone in the room knows, we've been seeing much more frequent and much more intense storms. And so under Tranche 1, we started to develop plans for going to a much higher level of service more in the range of 7 inches of rainfall in a 24-hour period. And Fortify Lauderdale has accelerated our Tranche 2 neighborhoods, which are going to be designed between 7 and 10 inches of rainfall in a 24-hour period, to the extent that it's feasible. And one of the things that you will notice is that under the phase 1 neighborhoods, the original plan was 7 neighborhoods. And by the time we finished the design work, and we're still working on the design work for one of the neighborhoods, it now encompasses 15 different neighborhoods. And we've already done improvements in 4 of those neighborhoods. 2 are under construction, and the other 3 are in permitting. For the Tranche 2 neighborhoods, again, the original plan was to do 7 additional neighborhoods. The revised plan following the April 2023 flood was increased to 17 neighborhoods. And once the conceptual designs were complete, that's now at 25 different neighborhoods. And the hope is for us to bundle those into 12 CIP projects that hopefully will be complete by mid-2030. Mid-2030s, I think it's 2034. 2034, yeah. And the expected investment is probably in the range of $500,000 to $1 billion of stormwater improvements over that time frame. When you look at this map, the colored areas are all areas that are now encompassed in either phase 1 or phase 2 planning for stormwater improvements, and especially in the coastal areas. Apologize for my voice. Especially in the coastal areas, tidal valves and pumping systems will be critical in order for us to meet that level of service and keep the roads dry under more typical rain events. So I wanted to get back to Steve's question. Is it too late? And the way that I want to answer this question is to look back before we look forward. Does anybody know where this picture was taken?
That's the tunnel. US 1.
US 1, that's the tunnel.
Yeah.
And that's what downtown looked like in 1968. And if you ask someone who lived on US 1 in 1968 what it would look like today, I don't think that they could describe what we have now in our downtown area. And I think this is a very precautionary tale, is that 50 years ago, we didn't know what was coming in the year 2025. And I don't know that we know exactly what our community will look like in the year 2070. But what I do know is that communities evolve, they change, they adapt. And so will our community look exactly like it does today? No, because the forces of nature are going to reshape much of our community. But it's not a message of despair, it's a message of adaptation. We will do our best to protect what we have now and to plan for a community that looks a little different and hopefully more resilient moving forward. And with that, Chief Whitten, that is the end of my presentation.
So before we open it up, could we have a round of applause? That was really amazing, and thank you for championing through that. I know that was difficult with your voice. We could stay on, we could do this for hours with you, have endless questions, etc. A couple of things I have, would you be kind enough to share the slides? It's incredibly helpful to us. One of the questions I had, and I kind of think you addressed it, is what responsibility does a homeowner have and what do we need to do? And I kind of think you referred to it. You know, it's our responsibility to not just sit back and let the city hopefully move forward with this, but how do the residents be more proactive and
so part of our Fortify Lauderdale program is that we are developing guidance tools for commercial and private property owners to look at their own properties and work to become more resilient. There are very simple, low-cost solutions to protect your home. And then there are other more dramatic solutions. And our goal is we're currently trying to hire a resilience coordinator to do that outreach and to work with our commercial and private residential partners to help those that are interested in having more resilient properties to understand what tools are in their toolbox so they can move forward. But certainly seawalls are just one aspect of being a good partner with your neighbors to ensure that you're not causing flooding into their properties or into the public right of way.
So I have one last question and I'll throw it open. Is the movement of the loan, when you talk about a wobble, is that something that's temporary and will get better, or that's just going to be a way to see the future?
It's temporary. It'll last for 5 to 10 years and then it'll settle itself back down.
Any questions from the board first? Anybody, yes, go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Nancy, for a stellar presentation. My question would be, if 10 houses are on a block and 9 of them raise their seawall up to the appropriate height, and the one who doesn't, isn't that going to be like a levee break in New Orleans? And therefore, now we have the turbulence for Digby and everything else that goes to now running water in addition to elevation. And then if you don't fix it all, isn't it just the weakest leak in the chain?
Very, very much like filling the holes in a sieve, you have to get every one. But the way that the city's seawall ordinance is designed is that the ordinance itself adapts to sea level. And so it's not based on an absolute standard.
Just raising the city seawall really, outside of spending money, doesn't accomplish much.
Well, it accomplishes protecting the adjacent roadway. And I think if you talk to the people on Isle of Palm, they will tell you that by the city raising the seawall on Isle of Palm, we have protected access to their homes on Isle of Palm. But you're absolutely right. If one neighbor's seawall is breaching and it's impacting the roadway, that's a problem. And code enforcement has a team that works with stormwater operations during king tide season to identify those homes and cite them. Because once they're cited, they have 1 year to remediate the seawall. They either have to repair it appropriately or they have to raise it to the new elevation requirement.
Their ability to gather satellite photographs during the peak of king tides that will identify where the floods are.
That will identify where
the water is breaching over. So code can only go to so many places, but if we could plan, since we know what king tides would be, we can plan to have satellite Google Earth photos or something taken at that time.
Yeah. So the challenge of our existing code related to code enforcement is that a code enforcement officer must witness the event. And while photographs taken by the next door neighbor or videos taken by a passerby or another city employee are useful, unless a code enforcement officer witnesses the actual water coming off that property, they will not cite the property.
So we can't deputize who.
Well, I'm sure all of you would like to have your own badge.
Anybody else on the board? And I think you were so thorough, stuff rally questions. So I'm going to plan to follow up with you offline with that. Nancy. The public, does the public have any questions of Dr. Gaston? You blew us away. Truly blew us away. So there are your Oreos that will be sent to you, and we thank you. Before we allow you to sign off, it is just incredibly enlightening. We have Tyler Brunel here, who's a realtor. We're all going to sign exclusive listings on when our houses for sale tomorrow. It's scary. It's back to life. And, thank you for that update, and thank you as always. As I said, when we start, when you reach out to Nancy, it's like the first thing she'll say is, "What can I do at home?" So, thank you again. We're truly honored.
Thank you, Chair.
So we move on now to, and I'm sorry it's taken a long, you guys. We do not have a document. We had a discussion on what we are referring to as the Riverwalk Seawall Replacement North Side Floating Dock. Is Martin's handling that part? No, I don't think so. So who is presenting on this?
City engineer staff.
Okay. Oh, good. So if you kind enough again, make sure you introduce yourself for those who don't know you, but thank you again for the trouble.
Yeah, so good evening again, everyone. Better odds, acting assistant manager. So the city's been working on a seawall project for a while. Staff members of our public works team, after this project, their consultant body here. I know they've been working closely with the downtown development for a green industry. And key stakeholders that have property in the area to try to take the plan and make sure it works for everyone, not for just now, but for the future. I think what Steve has said over and over and over, that we need to look at the future of what works for that. So they got a presentation to share on how the project's going. And as I alluded to earlier, we committed a fine grant for this for $8 million, $4 million match from the fine. So with that, I'll turn it over to the project team.
One member of the and the project manager and engineer of record to this project, work with the 15 engineering company. Basically, the city is working for the city right now on the replacing of the seawall that is indeed prepared from all the way from the railroad crossing and whatever. It's about approximately 500 linear feet of a wall. There is an existing cal wall that is almost down, and as they mentioned somebody, there's a lot of rain blocking the pedestrian way. So that cal wall is going to be demolished, and we're going to install a new seawall in front of the existing seawall. Also, as a part of the improvement, we're going to raise the seawall to the new elevation, which is about 3 feet, 5 feet, and the existing wall is at 3. Towel that is going to be removed on the piles, right? So the new seawall is the existing seawall is about 3 feet elevation. The new one would be a 5 feet. So there's going to be a difference in elevations about 2 feet that we're going to be addressing by feeding everything at one grade on the Riverwalk section. All the cardboard of this area is going to be removed, and the new seawall is going to be installed in that area. We're going to have a pump station on the west side and a floating dock on the east side of the project. This is how it's going to look. Talking about the living seawall, there's going to be a section of a living seawall that is going to be constructed as a part of this project. That is going to be on the east side of part of this. There are going to be other improvements. Yes, this north. So this is on this is San Luis right here. And you have the friends on cross this. This is the water. So you can kind of help yourself. So now these lines that you see here, Marco, you can explain a little bit more about those. These are the lines of the waterways, designated waterways. So our floating dock is going to be basically on the area where the catwalk is going to be removed. So if you can see it here, it's going gonna be from the new seawall, we're gonna extend about 13.5 feet, to the outside with the floating dock. I think it's a big document.
So, just to interrupt that, that floating dock is an issue. It's a big issue with MI and that, making sure a lot of folks buy here. So we're gonna have comments from folks, so, but that is expected to be a big dock. We decided to.
That's basically what the project is gonna entail. Raising all the river wall or the landside area because we're gonna have a differential in elevation, as Dr. Cartman was showing, right? About 2 feet, so everything's gonna be raised, so we're gonna have one grade or one level. Everything. This is a very draft use area for pedestrians, so we wanna make a pleasant area for pedestrians.
I just wanted to clarify the current seawall, there's the seawall, and then there's the concrete dock that extends out beyond. The floating dock would sit in that footprint of the concrete dock that's going to be removed. It's gonna be brought back to the seawall, and then the floating dock would go where that concrete dock is now. Again, bring it here for comments and questions and stuff, because will help. I know, I mean, the floating dock goes down with the water, so it's not exposed to the wall. Oh, the living seawall, the living seawall,
All seawalls, all seawalls do.
If you're really here for what we what we.
If that's where restaurants are, should be somewhat obvious. In the macro sense, the micro sense, the restaurant there.
That's a great question, Ben, because we do know that, you know, a typical seawall, was that right?
Right,
No,
right.
Sorry, a typical seawall that's on so does small. So, right. A little digging into that. Thank you. Any other questions? You said one section will be from the seawall, is that right?
Yes.
Why wouldn't the whole set,
Yeah.
all be made seawall? This is a cost.
I think it's gonna be a pilot project.
I think it's 120 feet of the big seawall.
I wouldn't know.
I think it's just because it's the first one the city's doing, we want to try it.
So that's that. Big step forward.
How's this funded?
That's being funded to city. I think Ben mentioned there's a plan also that's being placed.
Yes.
No, that's not pretty, I mean, that's pretty much it. We're gonna be replacing 580 feet of seawall that is gonna be raised. The seawall is gonna be built in front of the existing one. As shown here. So the existing seawall is gonna be here. The new one is gonna be here. It's gonna be higher. I mean, if you want to see some of the cross section, this one is gonna look like, right? This is the existing 3 feet elevation. So the new seawall will be at 5 feet. So we will have to, we will fill all the area on the riverwalk area, and then we will have a living seawall in the first 120 feet on the east side, and then a floating dock also on that in the same area.
How long do you envision this project taking?
Construction or design? Construction is about 18 months.
Will there be barges parked there along the river in order to construct this?
Well, that's something that we need to address with the contractor because that will be means and methods so that we anticipate that the some work is going to be done to the water side.
With steel sheeting being installed, are there any concerns around the other property about installed? And how deep, how long it is?
Well, we usually install a vibration monitoring.
Yes.
Right, so that's going to be in place. Construction.
And how long are the sheets?
I have the answer, but I can get that to you. How we're going to drive into the ground?
Yeah, how long are the sheets and how much penetration? And how many times?
I'm trying to get you that.
I appreciate that. So Robert Washington, last year, happened to be on beaches, right, et cetera. So, it's just nice having those set of eyes on it. Thank you for coming.
And longevity for the seawall? Really not, how long?
Well, everything is built to last at least 2 years. Those are dark metal sheets. That's the like
Dying for hurricanes, forces.
Yeah, that's taking into consideration.
I think it's a great project. It's nice to see the city being concerned about walkability and something that's appreciated. We open it up discussion. Anybody have thoughts? This is being presented to us. We have not been asked to do anything other than kind of discuss it at our comments, etc. We do want to talk about the full doc a little bit there because that does raise concerns. Mark, do you want to address some of that? Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, so again, one of the reasons we're here, I've never operated a tug, nor do we pretend that we ever have. So we're here seeking that expertise that you guys have accumulated over many years. But that is the proposed location of the dock. Again, I just want to clarify, it's going to be sitting in the footprint of what's already there. I think a lot of the concerns, again, still open to comment, but I think a lot of the concerns can be addressed through enforcement. At the end of the day, no matter where you place a floating dock, a very large vessel can dock to it. If it comes down to the enforcement, right? But again, we're here to see comments and for sure.
So I just want to highlight this project because there's been a lot of stakeholder involvement in this, and we're trying to balance all the competing needs, right? As Marco said, the tides in this area, the angles of the bridges, getting caught between the bridges, are all conversations that we've been having. There's been different concepts we've heard about where the floating dock should go in this area. The proposed location right now, kind of tucked away so that way it's not out in kind of the main navigable waterway. But again, we're not subject matter experts. I think the board has a lot of knowledge, so we want to get feedback from that. Mr. Washington, your question about the piles, I think it would be, a great opportunity maybe for Virginia from the DBA to speak on that. They just did their project not more than 100 feet away from this area. And she could probably explain some of the process they used, the successes, maybe the challenges they had there. And kind of help, we've been working closely with them based on the success of their project.
For the record, I'm not an engineer, so I will try to speak as intelligently as I can about the process we just went through. I'm Jenny Morehon, president of the DDA. As Ben mentioned, we are just wrapping up the Riverwalk section of the Heisinger Park project. As a matter of fact, we encourage you all to come out next week, next Thursday. We'll be reopening that stretch to the public with a beautiful new walkway where it really lets you get close to the water. That was done and that decision was made to redo, parts of that stretch of the water side. in collaboration with Marine Industries, we came to the Marine Advisory Board a couple years ago to make sure that we had zero to, no impacts on the navigable waterway and did not do any sort of floating dock or docking on that stretch, recognizing the vessel movement. With that being said, we did put about, I think it was about 13 piles into the waterway where that Riverwalk path comes out. We did not add any new seawalls. We did some repair work on the seawall, but it just came out ever so slightly where the old wooden dock was. I think there was a differential of a couple feet. But with those pilings, we had B&M Marine. They installed those from a barge on water side. I did not personally, or our team, get any complaints of impacts that had to water traffic, but I know Glenn and the team, they're on the river a lot and understand the needs of the upland and the water side folks. So, but we had great success in that effort, and overall, the Rising Park project should be done by the end of the year. With this project, I just want to give some credit because I think the city's been very responsive. As Ben mentioned, there's a lot of stakeholders here. There's upland property owners, business owners, there's Riverwalk, there's about 5 million people that traverse this Riverwalk by foot or bike, every year, as well as recognizing the great importance of the marine industry here in town. So how do we all work together and try to really, make the best outcomes where 1 + 1 = 3? And that's where, I think the public works team and the design consultant has really been creative in figuring out how do you take a new 5-foot seawall cap and make, as you mentioned, Chair, the walkability improve. Because what we do in this stretch as a community and as a city sets the tone for where other parts of the Riverwalk need to be improved, since many of them were built in the 80s. So I think there's a good movement now to address the upland areas. As it relates to the location of the docks, as in a way, DDA is agnostic to that. So as long as it works for the marine industry, as well as the rights that some of the upland owners that have license agreements for use of commercial dockage, I know that was discussed when I first walked in on that stretch, and any opportunity to give more access to the leisure boater in downtown. I mean, there's so much that we talk about downtown success in the city as a whole because of that lifestyle of the waterway. So giving more people access to downtown is certainly what we're looking at as a benefit. But I just thank Ben, the whole team and the commissioner as well, because this project is long overdue. I think everyone knows that. It's probably been sitting on the table way too long, and we're going to be making, in partnership with the city, some interim improvements that were mentioned just to clean up the visibility and the maintenance of the area, because this project probably won't start still for some time, and there'll be a construction. But just want to share that.
Thank you very much. If I can interrupt for 1 second, Jenny mentioned MIASF. I'm sure you folks are familiar with patients and MIASF. The floating dock is an issue to you. Would you be kind enough to just speak to that, please?
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it. We've met with these guys many times, and it's great vibes to rock work. The concern is when you get into these areas and stuff like that. So one, when we're doing measurements and stuff, we're picking a 36-foot boat in this region as an example, with a small foot. You can put a 55 or 60-foot boat on this side. So we need to plan for those things. Also, the opening here on the bridge is 60 feet. When you look at here, this gets into more Jenny's space. But your uplands, your biggest pinch point for walking and stuff, and the day we were there, actually, the walkers and stuff, you have a huge pinch point here. So having people offload out the boats, in addition to the general public walking and stuff, to me seems kind of counterproductive. As you go around this corner, you get wide open water here. The water gets much wider. The boats, as they navigate into the river, into the railroad bridge or out, they immediately turn to start coming to this way, to this bridge. So this area over here, we get the pump out station and things like that. We're working memorials and stuff like that. Again, this is the dead area. Nobody lays up right here. There's an outflow area and things that happen. You can lay out just east of that outflow. And the dock originally started 60 feet. This is the first time I've seen a 100-foot dock also. But if you tuck in here and stuff, you've got a lot of room. What could happen here, again, because of enforcement and things like that, someone lays up a 35, 40-foot catamaran here, you've got a much different view. In the meantime, the guys are going up and down the river and tugging things like that. Same on this side. So when we look at these things, we need to understand boats like this would be on this side just as easy, real easy. And we need to take that beam, because that's gonna be a 21-foot beam or more. When you get over here, this is a really tight point to begin with for the upland side. Again, the upland side's not our concern. Why would you put the boats coming off into the upland? You already have all these people. We have all this wide open room here, which would make a lot of sense if you look. Because as soon as this boat goes through here, it doesn't go like that. Even if you have a 50 meter, figure 160-foot boat. You got 80 feet here, 80 feet here, right? It starts turning right here and starts going here. If they're laying to go north of it, same thing. They don't lay up over here because it's trying to get back in. They lay up right here. And when they pass, it's the exact same thing. So we just need to think about navigation. Safe navigation on the river is 40 tight. We're already impacted by when you go farther, the wiggles and things like that. There's a feature creeping to people's docks, or people going stern too. This is the widest point of the area. Why not really consider here to put the dock? And why have we grown it from 100? I have no problem with 70. But this is a dead area here. It make a lot of sense. People get off in a wide open area here. You got the 9/11, sorry. You got the 9/11 memorial. It's a tight zone here to begin. The day that we stood there, we watched an 80-foot boat go by. We could have touched it, but, and so why are we going to impact an industry that's $9.8 million in this town, employs 122,000 people? And with the investments that are upriver, Lauderdale Marine Center, Bradford Marine, we're not talking 50 million anymore, 40 million. Lauderdale Marine Center traded at 340 million. Bradford's probably put an excess of 200 million counting as they go forward. These boats, the predictability, people vote with their feet. The boats vote with their hull. They can go anywhere in this country to make it easy. The river's already a choke point. But again, the captains are the ones that make these decisions. We need to make it easier, not harder. We're making it harder, and there's really no reason. We have all this other space here where we can accommodate a dock, tuck them in there, and more importantly, it helps out people getting off the yacht.
So you pretty much need, if you did the dock here, and what we discussed is going to be my concern is I don't care how many signs, unless you have a cop posted there, 5 minutes after that goes up, it'll be wrapped. You have people wrapping up, people go to the. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, no, I think we're supportive of getting feedback. That's why we wanted to come here. Consultant has been willing to modify the plan, discuss things for you. And so that's why we came to this board. With in my last comment, the board turned over to hear your comments. You know, I know you've seen the lines up here. I just want to give you credit and this board credit for going through that GIS exercise and create that map, because our consulting team was able to take that, the work you guys did, and overlay it on their docs. I think that this tells the story a lot better than just guessing from reports. So again, I appreciate the work that this board does on creating synergies, on understanding the transparency of that.
I have one thing that I'd like to add to this. I'm looking at these, the schematic on the floating dock itself. I'm looking at this, if I'm reading this right, it shows 18 inches of freeboard. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, that's very low. That's very low. So you start putting a bunch of boats on these docks, right? And you start putting a bunch of boats on these docks, it starts loading and unloading. First of all, the elevation from the dock to a deck on a boat, there's going to be trip and fall issues there, because there's, especially with your 35 and 40 footers, your bigger boats, okay, there's going to be issues there. I would strongly recommend another dock with a lot more freeboard. If you want a really good look at something like that, take a look at the floating docks that they have in Marina Bay. They have a lot of freeboard to them, and there are big boats that are rafted onto those.
If I may, and that's a very good point. These are 18 inches, is an average, right? These are not that I mean, with the being used. You know? And another thing is that the floating dock, these are just to be used not for vessels, these are more to be used for kayaking, paddling, or small boat.
That's not a realistic. That's not realistic.
Unless you have a cop there, again, I'd say it because honestly, anybody in this board, if we didn't know better, we would pull up here. And if we saw somebody tied up, we'd say, it's okay to wrap up. And again, it goes back to enforcement, education, etc. But we're pulling ourselves.
And the other thing is the size of your cleats. That's gonna be pretty important as well. You put little 6-inch cleats, little plastic cleats, it'll be over with. Okay, you're gonna need some real.
And then that'd be a high up yourself.
I'm sorry.
But to your point, you know,
Feel back.
with the equipment and stuff, but again, this is the widest point of the river here, right here, right?
Right,
You're at 70
right,
feet.
right.
You got 105 feet, and you got 30% setbacks is what we're supposed to have with that also. So you're taking 30% setbacks in a 105 foot area. We're picking the easiest boat, the 36 foot boat that we all know can be a 70 or 80 or 100 foot boat here. Right. So you got to have the maximum of what's going to sit there.
Right.
To be able to do this accurate.
Right.
And then have their set.
I mean, I run 100-foot dinner cruise boat. Okay, can I pull up to that thing and tie off to it? Not with what I'm seeing here. Okay. No, I just won't be able to. It's not useful. Yeah. But take a look at the Marina Bay docks. Those are good.
Just a question though, is that not what we want to prevent? Is an extremely large vessel from docking at the floating dock that
No.
would stick out too far?
No.
Do you want extremely large vessels to dock at the floating dock? That's the question. If you make it accessible by having the extra large fleets and having the high freeboard and making it accessible and easy for a very large vessel, kind of inviting them, right, by virtue of not having that accessibility for a very large fleet, then it can actually stick out as far.
No,
Right.
Okay, so you got to understand. You put the right dock in there, and then it's up to the city to manage how it's used. So if we start out with the right facility, okay, then we can actually be more user friendly to vessels across a wider range of sizes. And it's up to the dock master and how we manage those facilities is what makes the difference.
So remember that you're still gonna have all these areas here, for docking. It's not limited to the floating dock.
Yeah, you've got the little seawall for docking too, but you got to factor in also.
I'm just saying, I think 18 inches and small little plastic plates. That's
So let me try to move this forward.
Yeah.
I'm concerned about time. That Norm is absolutely right. If we want larger vessels, we want a good thing. The answer is that whether it's 18 inches or freeboard, 24, it's as far as I'm concerned, secondary to the location. So I think comments from Norm and anybody else on the board as to what the dock should look like, etc. Those are secondary to the location. What I'd like to get is comments back from the board that we can send then. And we can do that, guys, without taking up a lot of time by asking if you just provide comments to him and sort them out and send them to them, etc. Bottom line is dock configuration is something that based upon our knowledge we can share, but we got to agree on location. That is the point. So before my recommendation again, we could talk ad nauseum, but we're not going to have any formal results tonight. We need to move this forward. I'm asking you to do so by applying offline to some thoughts that we were starting to think about. What else do we do?
The only quick one is the purpose of the docks. Are they for day boats, restaurant? I mean, is there an overall purpose?
Yes, day dockage as opposed to overnight dock.
For people that, is there a time limit? We only want to park there for 2 hours. They can park,
Well, wouldn't it just be in the same footprint that we've used for Andrews Avenue, Third Avenue downtown, which has been wonderful?
First come for service.
Yeah. Those docks are great. They serve a wonderful purpose.
The idea is to use it because the dock and right. But again, as those patients have said, and others have said here, first of all, assuming that folks want to do something wrong, which they think is right. And again, so we, as our job, I would say first and foremost, the navigability of the river is cross part of this. So we got to follow it. That makes sense. guys agree with that?
Yeah, but I'll leave it.
So why don't we plan, and that's gonna bring me to the next question about our July 3rd meeting, but why don't we plan, I'm gonna ask you all, again, if you don't mind, just take a moment, because this is a real important issue. Hit points, choke issues, et cetera, river, there's no more concept of moratorium, but this is what we can do for that. We can make sure that it happens. So I'm gonna thank you, unless you have something else, that we will continue to pursue this on.
Anytime.
So that brought me to the question of July 3rd. I think we talked about it earlier, Commissioner Storrs walked in. So we don't know right now if we have a waiver, we don't know what it looks like, but it would be helpful to know if anybody wants to come and plans to come to the meeting. If we don't have a forum, really, other than just kind of an educational forum, there's really no reason to have a meeting. Do we have an obligation to consider have a meeting?
We are able to cancel a meeting, but, I can also attempt to reschedule a meeting. The challenge is obviously the availability of space. So if the consensus of the group is that July 3rd is not a good idea, I would first attempt to reschedule.
Let's ask you on the let's talk about it quickly. I think, I would mention you might not be around. So
Yeah, I don't know yet. I'll let you know as soon as I do, but.
we don't have a forum, we don't have a full house tonight that we can reach out. Is there anybody here who actually absolutely will not be here July 4th? We are right now.
A low probability.
I talked to that, it's just, it's.
Let's take about this over the next week. And let him reach out because he has, if he's gonna make a decision, oh, this is gonna do the vote.
Yeah, it's important to remember that the commission, since the commission doesn't meet between, I think, the end of June until the middle of, or late August. There's kind of a reset period there too. And we don't need an August, right? We don't need a move to
Potentially look the following week, takes everyone out of it. And
I can try to do that. I can get back to the chair. I don't know.
So we will, so Andrew will send a note, he will follow up and ask you about availability. And again, we'll figure out what's best. I'm very concerned if somebody has a waiver that we not address it. Unfortunately, right now, Andrew doesn't know what's on.
I'll try to, we can attend or whatnot. I'll find out. Thank you.
All right, so that brings us to a communication from the bridge. I thought you were speaking away, Marco. So we have created a new agenda item. Which would be helpful here. We created a new agenda item, and I kept referring to Marco as our new chief waterway officer. I'm not going to say that anymore. Our waterway chief, I'm not new. Our chief waterway officer will show up. He's going to participate on the board and be a real asset. So again, we have a new monthly item that is referred to as communication report, to be a monthly report from Marco, an update, again, from last night, which was going to share, which is one of the type of meetings that we've all attended, and we were extremely well received. So Marco, with that, we've got a lot of ground covered on the photo review.
I'm gonna try and do this somewhat brief. I'll still get the information. That way we can wrap the meeting up. A lot of you have heard a lot about Anchorage limitation areas or ALA specifically in Lake Sylvia. This was an option that the neighborhood was pushing for. It was an option the city was working on, trying to see if it's something we can do. Recently, the state passed House Bill 481, which allows for a completely different method of enforcement, which is another option that we are actively looking into. And just wanted to point out the differences between both. Just so everyone knows, we did this presentation yesterday to the neighborhoods. It was a resounding, everyone in the room voted to not go forward with the ALA. They wanted to move forward with House Bill 481, or adopting an ordinance in the city code that aligns with House Bill 481.
May I interrupt for 1 second? Bob Dunkel, our assistant town attorney, is not here. He had asked us to make a couple of points. It was important to him to share that we haven't been chasing our tail for the last months, that the House Bill 481, which Martha was addressing, just took effect on May 19th. assuming we are on our own, the state has made it right. The fact is that we weren't spending waste.
Right. So an ALA, I'm just going to go through this pretty briefly. An anchorage limitation area is a designated area in which a person may anchor for a period not exceeding 45 consecutive days in a 6-month period. That consecutive becomes very important in the later part of this PowerPoint. So an ALA cannot exceed 10% of the county's delineated navigable, in fact, waterways. What that means, there will more than likely become a point in time where you cannot any longer designate an ALA in Broward County because other municipalities may avail themselves of this option and do so. City of Hollywood has already done so in North Lake and South Lake. In case you didn't know, both of those areas are now anchorage limitation areas. Had the pleasure of speaking with the City of Hollywood and asking them how it's been working for them. For them, it has been working wonderful. However, they have not had to actually enforce anything on it yet. So it is working for them. It does not necessarily mean it is the best option for us, but it is an option currently. More about an ALA has to be less than 100 acres in size and not include any mooring fields or marinas and be clearly marked with signs and buoys. The signs and buoys are something that the cost would have to be incurred for the installation of the signs and buoys and ongoing maintenance. Like I said, local example of that, City of Hollywood, North Lake and South Lake. Lake Sylvia, for those of you that don't know, is considered a water sports activity area according to our city code, meaning vessels 21 feet and under engaged in water skiing activities can operate in that lake. Any other vessel that is not has to abide by regular whatever the wake zone is. This is the official sketch, one of the official sketches of the proposed anchorage limitation area. It's that little hashed area in the middle. This is it a little bit more zoomed in. You can see there's a 200-foot buffer that surrounds the proposed ALA. And there would be 8 marker buoys delineating the proposed ALA. Some questions about that 200-foot buffer that we very frequently get. Is a vessel prohibited from anchoring outside of the marked boundary? No, they can absolutely anchor outside in that 200-foot buffer. The next question we get, if a vessel does anchor in that 200-foot buffer, how long can they stay there? Until they sink or get arrested or are they're go derelict or whatever it is. There isn't a limit. And then third, if a vessel departs the ALA after 44 consecutive days, travels 1 nautical mile and comes back the next day, he gets another 45 consecutive days and it starts all over again. Does anyone have any questions on ALA? Yes.
Is there a requirement for dredging? No. The city picks up that cost? No.
No.
What side of that is quite shallow?
On the list of things. Passage of House Bill 481, just like I said, it was passed a couple weeks ago. It restores an authority that we previously had that was stripped away from the cities in 2016. It allows counties or municipalities within counties of a population of 1.5 million or greater, so City of Fort Lauderdale falls into that category, allows us to regulate anchoring once again. It permits time-based anchoring of no more than 30 days and not consecutive, just 30 days in any rolling 6-month period. And this would be citywide, not just that designated anchorage limitation area. So that would affect the area north of Las Olas and north of the Suntex Marina where everyone anchors out over there. This would fall in, that area would fall under this. So yes, unless it's a public mooring field. Public mooring fields don't count, marinas don't count, things like that. But if you were just anchored out in the waterway, this would apply to you.
And that is, okay, so that is any municipality before the 1.5 million.
No. So it goes on 1.5 million population. 7.5 million population. Like Broward, days. They just want to push.
Right.
So that if
It's not the
any
city,
municipality,
It's the city. It's not the city. The city doesn't have.
right,
Any
any city inside a county with a population of 1.5 or more can enact this ordinance. So
It doesn't have to be the whole city.
it doesn't have to be. Generally ordinances are, but it could be carved out. I mean, ordinances are specific to the city.
That eventually makes someone not be able to moor in the whole Miami and Broward if they enact it. They would not be able to
talk
moor.
about Fort Lauderdale
But they would not be able to moor for more than 30 days, period.
in a 6-month period. That's correct.
That's
So-
not what they did in Miami. They did Star Island, all the islands, on my own Star.
Right.
That's
So you
what-
can move from one to the other.
no, that's the ones that you can't.
You can't.
That's the area you can't make. There's no overnight dock that you got Anchorage in that. area.
Let's keep to Fort Lauderdale. Where was I? It permits time-based anchoring of no more than 30 days in any rolling 6-month period. It does not allow municipalities to impose more restrictive limits than that 30-day or 6-month period. What that means for Fort Lauderdale, we have now the option of the creation of an ordinance that would align with House Bill 481. Enforcement of this, this is just what an ordinance could look like. It is unlawful to anchor a vessel for a period of 1 hour or more between half hour after sunset, half hour before sunrise, for more than 30 days in any 6-month period. So this potential layout would allow vessels to anchor out during the day, not a problem. When they anchor out at night, it counts as one of their 30 days. So this would still allow for vessels to be traveling and transiting through the area. They can stay in our area. They can use our amenities. They can come and visit. They can wait for a weather window to leave, but they need to be out before the 30 days is up. And again, this is a city ordinance, so it does not mean that they have to leave. They have to leave our city. They can go to Pompano, they can go to Hollywood, they can go to Dania, they can go elsewhere, and then they can come back within the next 6 months and have another 3 days.
Fine per day or for 6 months.
It would be, that's a good question. I don't know.
I'll stay another 6 months.
I will have to find out. Good question.
What about events like Winterfest Boat Parade, July 4th, that kind of thing, where people will anchor at night for several hours?
So that, I mean, that would be 1 day, but I mean, that's, most people that are going out to watch the boat parade are, don't usually live on their boat. They're recreational boaters that go to watch the parade and then go home. But we realize all of these things can be baked into the ordinance. There can be exceptions during certain periods of time. There can be exceptions during weather events. There can be exceptions of all of that. The good part of this is it's a city ordinance and it allows us to control a lot of it. The ALA is extremely reliant on Broward County and state statute. This we can customize however we need, right? So I'm sorry?
How would you envision enforcement?
So I talked to Travis about that. They're working on ideas. More than likely, it's going to look like a spreadsheet, doing daily checks of vessels. Once they notice a vessel being there a couple of days, I mean, they have a pretty good idea when a new vessel shows up. They add it to the spreadsheet, note the date that it was there. Once they start getting closer to that 30-day, they're going to start getting contacts and, hey, you have a few days to move. You have 2 days to move.
Police officer become meter.
If that's what you want to
sell
call
a flag.
You tell Travis.
No, he has to go.
He's a lot bigger than me. I'm not.
He already has said that they, every month, every day that they're out there in the water, they're checking for
They
no
check it every
anyway,
day.
so they usually, anyone who anchors, he usually goes up to him within the first couple of days and just gives them a, hey, man, how's it going? Just checking on you and make sure you're not there. So I mean, this would be probably easing some of their burden because the derelict boats would be
And now
gone.
realize this would be easier to enforce than the ALA would because shorter time frames they actually have to keep track of that right now. So again, also part of this, if we do get a pump out vessel, fingers crossed, that's an extra set of eyes in the water, like Steve said earlier. That's an extra person going and knocking on all of these boats that are anchored out there saying, hey, how you doing? Do you need a pump out? What's your plan with your pump out? This is my contact information. Do you need one right now by any chance? To be out there proactively making contact with these vessels.
Do we know the economic impact or how long boats stay here or how many boats we're talking about that spend all month here?
I mean, there's been in Lake Sylvia, there's been 40 boats or more at certain times.
But are they there for more than a month?
I could tell you, I would assume so, by the looks of some of them.
Know if there's an economic value that was brought away. That or at least it should be considered if these folks are spending.
I don't know that there's much. I mean, a lot of these individuals don't even leave the boat. They live on their boat. Most of them don't even have power. A lot of them end up sinking, dragging anchor, crashing into properties.
Shopping at Winn-Dixie.
A lot of them are just public. A lot of them are just stored there. People don't want to pay for storage for their boats, so they just store them there. So.
In the ordinance, should you require that they pump out once a week?
Yeah, so this is all things that, again, in our ordinance, we have the creativity to do things like this, right? That's one of the beauties of having a city ordinance versus something that has to rely on the county or the state. But yeah, I mean, if we had a pump out boat or we have the desire to require them to utilize one of our current pump out stations, these are all things that can be explored. Obviously, we would be back to feedback to get more information about it.
I think that's a good thing.
So I just sent around the table, other collectors past the applications, if we pass a couple of applications. So guys, this is from Metric. So this is, so what I've done over the past few months in conjunction with, clean water, et cetera, and I'm speaking a lot more is I have, dug into, and patients who is from the certainly appreciate the sensitive nature of the waterways up there. I looked at Nantucket, I looked at Martha's Vineyard, so we looked at the Powder Blue Shore, which is Block Island, and I'm also digging into the Clean Vessel Act pump out and dump station performance, whatever, 2021 in San Francisco Bay. And what they all have, if you look at to the right of where it says Powder Blue Shore on the harbor guide, if you pump out, you're going to find $2,000 minimum fine. It goes on here, etc. and talks about where it talks about what you regulate. It's there's no discharge. They provide free pump out. All you got to do pretty much is get on your radio, you call channel 73 and come there. One of the things they do in Block Island is they lock down your Wi-Fi. Now, how do they do that? They simply use a colored zip tie and they put on your boat. So you ain't pumping out. And again, I don't know where it is there, but I think the first fine is minimum 2,500, and the second one is 25,000. So they take this very seriously. There, it's 25. Now, why do they take this seriously? For the same reason, if you go down there, no cleaning boat bodies, no discharge, unauthorized use, because they take their waterways very seriously. So one of the things that Marco is working on with the pump out code is establishing a regular routine to make sure that the boats that are staying overnight here are pumped out. And I compliment them for that, but we're using again, what's been already created in front of us. This is an interesting statement I would read and interrupt you quickly. This is from California. This California Clean Vessel Act pump out and dump station performance report, which I have highlighted. Discharging sewage overboard creates environmental and human health problems, especially in the state water and recreational boaters. To reduce the negative impacts of discharging sewage overboard, all boaters are encouraged to use safe management facilities, pump out stations. So, well, we do have pump out locations, as Andrew has pointed out, but we're going to make it a lot easier for them. But if we program this, we'll hopefully provide that next week. Thank you.
Possibly kind of forward. So for House Bill 481, we would revise city code to implement the 30-day and the 6-month framework. Obviously, with all of these stipulations baked into that ordinance, whether we choose to do some certain times of the year as an exception for whatever reason it may be, maybe for the boat show, maybe for whatever it is. And then also whether it's citywide or specific to a certain area. These are all things that we'd have to come up with. They would be brought before commission for 2 readings and then put onto the books. ALA, very different process. City and the county have to come to agreement on with an interlocal agreement. They have to figure out who is paying for the buildings, who is installing them, who is maintaining them. The county has to do 2 readings for it. They have to pass the ordinance that then allows us to move forward with that. It is a very long and dragged out process, but it's still a tool. So next steps, I am here. Yesterday we gathered public feedback. Today I am presenting this before the Marine Advisory Board for thoughts, comments, questions, concerns. And then whatever those are, we'll present to City Commission for direction on a path forward. That's it.
I got a question. Yes. So yesterday, obviously, I was there at committee. The House Bill 41 overwhelmingly was favored by the public. The one thing, I don't know, maybe Patience knows, harbor masters seem to work really well. I've experienced them up in Newport, and they are a gatekeeper. And I see on this the harbor master numbers right, on the top here. I almost feel like you're kind of our de facto harbor master becoming one now. Is there a reason we just don't have a harbor? I mean, this is a question. Would a harbor master benefit Fort Lauderdale?
Well, we haven't been operating a harbor. And this is what we're contemplating now, so it's probably a good idea.
The north side of Las Olas is a wonderful place for a mooring field to.
Again, you talk about here, like, you're not allowed to have
it's great.
Because you can't, because your anchor's gonna drag, and I don't care how much experience you have, your anchor's gonna drag. So, again, would be real proactive. So there are steps, and again, it's gonna be on his shoulders. So Martha's job as chief waterway officer is really chief of the bottle washer with everything going on in the water. So at his discretion, he feels he needs additional folks to goes forward, and again gains additional credibility to the commissioners. I'm sure.
I have a feeling in the next month or 2, I'm gonna get a hat that says harbor master or something on this board. But
Yeah, right.
It could be chief of the bottle.
Harbor poop master. Or something. Any other questions or comments?
I have 2 friends who are living on boats now. They're waiting for parts to come in from overseas. They're sailboats. One is living just south of Las Olas on the bridge there. And they're anchored, and they're sitting here. They would love to apply because now it's hurricane season, and they're kind of stuck with their insurance policies. They want to have it there, but they don't have the parts on it. So I don't know. I mean, that would be my only thing is how much this would affect just catamaran. The people who do like sailboats and stuff, obviously LMC and Bradford sort of money's not an object to most of those repairs. There's a whole set of harbor town people who money is an issue on their repairs, so they don't fly in parts major.
Again, so part of the ordinance.
Have those people had an opportunity to? You went to the people who live in houses. They obviously have a vested interest in one way, so that's clear. I'm just wondering, are we cutting the industry by doing something? Be considered.
It's just something that can be baked into the ordinance, right? There can be a certain exception for mechanical failure or emergency that can allow for an additional 30 days.
They're in the middle of a work permit or in the middle of a workshop.
Right. These are all exceptions that can be baked into it. I would assume a hurricane, weather-related things. I mean, there's a million things that could cause an exception, being reasonable. But again, this is only the city of Fort Lauderdale. So absolute worst comes to worst, and they tell him it's going to be 2 years before his part is ready. He can find one of the mooring spots. He can avail himself of using one of the city marinas, or he can just move to a different city in Broward County, because this is only in Fort Lauderdale or in a certain area of the city of Fort Lauderdale, depending on how the ordinance is adopted.
Actually, where's Fort Lauderdale start and end on the waterway?
On the north end, it's up by Sea Ranch.
It's by Bay Colony.
South End is 7th Street.
Yeah, right at the port.
Right at the north, the entries of port.
So, let me move this forward. We're spending a lot of time on this, and I appreciate this time. We are not sending up a motion or anything to the city commission. It's just reminding everybody what's going on. As Martha said, first of all, a lot more time is spent on this. And at the end of the meeting, I'm not sure who asked for it, but somebody asked for a show of hands. Now, we have again, the timing is important, because had HB 481 been at least closer to execution, we probably would have spent time in the AOA.
I do want to make one mention too. There was 2 or 3 individuals that do live on their boats that did come to the meeting and still raise their hand for 481. Once they understood the actual terms of it, they were fine with it. They said it was.
So, but you were asked at the end to have a show of hands. Do we like AOA or do we like HB 41? Now, again, there's no formal motion going to the city, but it would be helpful to get your thoughts on this. So, the AOA, as we have now seen, is extremely cumbersome. It's something that was unworkable from the start, but we were going to try to work within it. Having this HB 481, it's how I could use it. As Martha said, it's basically 2 meetings, and it becomes law, and then we have to work out again exclusion, work with PD, work with MIA, etc. Just out of curiosity, as a show of hands, is anybody again inclined for ALA versus HB 41? So I'm going to ask, who's in favor of HB 41 based on the conversation? Who's in favor of ALA? So we had a complete consensus in the room last night, and that helps Mark a great deal. So thank you. So this was Council Bob Dunkel asked us to bring this up. Can we just discuss this?
So there's a component to the HB 41 that legal has asked for us to, if we were in favor of the HB, to support some language, which is basically the same exact language from the House that would be incorporated into our city code. Regulation of vessels anchored in public waterways, 30-day limitations at 6 months. Same exact stuff. So that is something that Bob Local, if the board was in favor of HB 41, asked us to make a motion.
So again, this was, could you go back to that slide, Mark, if you don't mind? I'm sorry, could you close up your computer? So, but I want to make sure everybody knows what I'm talking about, Andrew, because I have one copy. We have multiple copies.
Yeah, I handed them out.
No, yeah, we don't have it on.
So what we're looking at here again, Bob Duncan just wanted to make sure we fully understood this and didn't have an issue with this. This is baked into HB 41 and explains how it works. So he just wanted to acknowledge that. Am I correct?
Yeah. He was seeking a motion of support for that language within our code if we were in favor of HB 41.
So we will bring it up for a vote. We have a forum. Again, this is baked into HB 4041. It simply talks how it begins, how it ends, and the timing on the 30 days and 6-month period, etc. I want to make sure everybody's comfortable with this because we're going to bring it to a vote. Real that support to Bob Dunkel and the city for Lauderdale. This is consistent.
Can I ask one question before we now we get language and we're going to probably vote on it? Does the city have the ability? We cannot take away the 30 days, but could we add 15 and say 45 instead? I'm just asking that for like as
my opinion.
Do you want to wait for Bob for next month? Because I don't know, again, maybe the exceptions also need to be included in this.
I'm just wondering because obviously if we do this in the city, then we are going to be back and forth. It's like far as defining
state,
right.
so we can change.
We could tweak it
We can't make it,
This is
we can't
just
make
to
it stricter. We can
That's what I'm
make-
asking, like, the stricter part is we can't make it
We could,
28 days, but we could make it 45 if we decided to. Just
Right.
because the city were like, hey, let's have a little bit more leeway, since the other one, there's no teeth. It might as well not even exist, because you could just go to that 200-foot area,
and you're good.
dock that night, and then come back the next day. This one has teeth. It's legit. It has teeth that can make you go away. We can put stuff in it to where, hey, they come for a waiver to say, hey, I got something part to come. It's gonna take me another month to get it, and stuff like that.
Thank you for understanding that, because it was so, one of the concerns last night, and again, you mentioned it, that's an example with respect to the city manager. Does the city manager understand that we didn't just decide to change direction, that we were moving forward to make sure that if the state didn't prove that we had a secondary course of action? Fact is, you're absolutely.
It's already approved.
Had we only had the ALA to deal with, we would continue to massage that. So Marcus, if this makes our life easy, to read these in the book. So it sounds to me, I'll get to you in a second, Greg, but it sounds to me like at the end of the respect the body, so we can't do this. We're not fully shelved. There's most issues. I mean, we can, if we're asking people to emotion something that I am not comfortable discussing, and I think we need to figure it out.
Well, the request was made by Bob to support the language which was derived from the state bill, as part of the initial ordinance. That was my understanding.
So,
Can we amend it to add exceptions after we vote on these? Or?
City manager, Rogers.
Yeah, so, Chair, we just got this information feedback last night. There's a lot of good things, and I agree. I appreciate Mr. Bell's effort to expedite this and give us kind of clear path. I think summer recess coming up, which is gonna be off until August, September. When we would bring this back to them anyway, so I think we have time, the staff can go ahead and use this foundational language, work through some of the exceptions, scenarios, and come back to the more robust proposal.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And again, out of respect to Bob Dunn, we're, not all of us have gone to law school, and to ask us to judge the language on something where we might miss a period or comma, I don't feel right doing that. So as long as Ben is cool with that, then Rogers, we're going to take this motion to table.
Second.
Good idea. Well, in favor. Thank you.
I think what I would ask in the meantime is if you guys have ideas for those exceptions, and whether it's the whole city or a certain area, let Andrew know so that Bob can be apprised of that. We can work on something.
You ever been a Harp Fest?
No, I have not. But I have a feeling I will be.
His job.
People come here end of October on their way to the Bahamas, spend 2 or 3 weeks here. And then on the way back in April, they now come back here. They're gonna fall in the same 6-month period window. So I think, while their intent is not to have a free condo on the water, I get that. But we might need to be somewhat cognizant of people who use our facilities, our marinas, our food, everything, transient from Caribbean trips going back.
These are all recommendations. Please forward them to us so Bob can make all of them together.
You can't be here 30 days in 120 days. Is that possible?
Yeah, we just can't make it stricter.
And the original is a
30-day, 6-month
Well,
period.
that would be more restricted if we made 30 days for 120 versus 180.
Right.
That would be more restricted.
And I thought in there,
But that would solve for the LA back and forth.
when the wording different.
The wording is different as far as consecutive days or not consecutive.
Which the difference to us would be consecutive. If that's the difference of it, is it maybe because their wording is actually less strict than what that wording was that we've done, right? The 30 to 60 days, their wording is consecutive. So, am I reading this right? That we could say that if you've left Fort Lauderdale, Broward County to go to the Bahamas and you've been gone for 60 days, you could come back for another.
It's in a 6-month period. period.
It is, so it's not.
So you essentially get 2 30-day windows per year.
That's why I wanted to shorten it up to 120 days.
Yeah.
We
So
go
we
back.
can't.
We can't change that.
Yes, okay, that's what we're trying to do.
So, and we can't make it long range. That would also be.
That's.
But the different, the
It
different
could be
thing is
citywide,
that
it could
we're,
be-
it is a city, so they could go to like Santa Barbara and Pompano. They could stay there for 30 days.
Right, and they can
go to
whatever the ordinance up there calls for.
Boca, 30 days. So, I mean, that's what I was worried about, was county, but you're saying city, that changes it. And it means that you can go to Miami, you can come up to Fort Lauderdale. You just plan your 30 days, go all the way going up to up the thing, if that's what you're gonna do. Cool. All right.
So,
We have several properties that are water-based submerged land of privately owned. They won't be impacted by this rule, correct?
Have to ask Bob. I wouldn't think so.
I don't think so, but
Well, that's not, we already have Bob, if the water column state as opposed to the bottom, so it does get complicated.
But yeah,
I understand the question, I know the area you're talking about, but it does get complicated because there's different. Water column.
And Andrew, when this gets put, it's gonna be a written out thing, it'll probably come to us for like, we support it, and then it'll go to the commission.
I think once we fully bake in all the exceptions and ideas that you guys are gonna forward to Andrew, Bob will put all of that together. Probably come back here again in a closer state, and then from there, it goes to commission for 2 reading and adoption, unless I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think that's
I
great.
think that's probably the route that it's great.
so phenomenal after this, it's just, we got real lucky with this, so. Normal presentation, phenomenal after, great job, that Roger, it's just, again, everything's moving in the right direction. Done, have you memorized everything here at this point?
I said I had more to present, but at this point, we're good.
So, but we're all getting tired. We have, want to thank Marco, never going away, hopefully, so he's a part of it. We have new old business, we're late, guys, unless anybody has anything special, and please share if you do.
And one thing maybe I can put on the agenda next time is about ladders on floating docks.
And I apologize, Brett, because you did bring that up, so, I would like to put in. Sure. So Robert Washington also mentioned to Andrew and Andrew today, Robert wants to understand how the procurement process works in the city of Fort Lauderdale.
Well, maybe not anymore, we're gonna.
Oh, I'm sorry, sometime in the future.
It's not next month, it'll be maybe September.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
So, before you, so procurement and then, the top of the.
Please,
ladders on just floating docks or?
Well, right now you have to have them on other docks.
Okay.
On other marine, on private property, you have to have a ladder, you have, the ordinance allows. So there's nothing there about floating dock.
Okay, so ladders on floating. Okay.
They recently put up the, throw buoys stuff, cause that was required.
Okay.
But now if you throw the buoy, you can't get the person out of the water.
I'll put it on as a discussion.
Thank you. So I'm gonna end with one thought that our friend Barry Flanagan could make tonight, asked us to share, and it's just fascinating. You guys know the history of Suntex across Old Marine, the city of Renton, so some liked it, some didn't. I think they did a great job with Marine, for the state, I mean, with great respect. So Barry Flanagan's son, who's also a sea captain, took a boat with 10 people on it, from the story, took a boat this past weekend, 10 people on it, had a reservation in Ocean Park. Wonderful new restaurant that the Russell was running. Both the restaurant has a reservation, it's been covered by boat, no problem, pull up, etc. Pulled up the dock end. Now the dock end works Sundays. Barry Jr. said, hey, I'm here for dinner. I said, no problem, it's $225. And then he said, but I have a reservation. The restaurant has nothing to do with this. Now we read. Then he said, well, I've waited for both. And that was so well, kids will appear to survive. So they stayed there for a couple hours, had dinner at the facility that we rented to them. Seems it's I don't have an answer, but it's something we're gonna have to dig into because I think we were all under the impression we could drive into that arena at Bidford Center. That's not
The original said it was $50. Yeah, cause I have a memo from the guy who, Eric, who said it was 50 and then they went to 250.
So we have to find it out. I don't know. So we need to look at the lease that we have with Suntex, and we're gonna check into that. Because,
Sorghum Restaurant, which is the old,
Yeah.
ship, they charge $40.
but again, this is a facility that we lease to them, so we're gonna check and see if we have any language in there. But the idea that an average guy, so Valley Sun, by the way, turned around and left.
Yeah.
He went over to 15th Street, pulled up his 42 foot, had a wonderful dinner, tipped the guy in a doing his house. Are we done?
Did he tip him 251?
Barry? Thank you all. We'll see you sometime in the future. We are, oh, can I have a motion?
Motion adjourned.
Second. Second. Come on.
I know. Oh, there's seconds.
Nice, Andrew. Don't feel like that with the new.